It is 10 o'clock. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The NFL Scouting Combine continues in Indianapolis, and there is Titans news this morning from Adam Schefter as the team has granted outside linebacker Harold Landry permission to seek a trade. Landry is due a base salary of $17.5 million in 2025 as he comes off a season with 9 sacks. Meanwhile, the quarterbacks continue to dominate the discussion in Indy. GM Mike Borgonzi met with the media yesterday and reminded us that there is still a lot of work to be done in evaluating both Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward.
At the end of the day, we have to make the best decision at this point for the Titans. I mean, if we deem like taking a quarterback is the most important thing right now, then we'll do that. But we have to go through this process here. So this is like one touch point in the process. We've gone through the whole evaluation part. Now we're finally getting to sit down and meet with these guys and talk with them. We'll have pro days. They'll have 30-day visits. So we have to go through the whole process really to make that decision.
College basketball last night, number 5 Tennessee won at LSU on Tuesday, 65-59. Zakai Ziegler with 17 points as the Vols move on to 23-5, 10-5 in SEC play. And the Nashville Predators have now lost 8 of their last 10. Last night, a 4-1 defeat at home to the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. They'll host the Jets tomorrow night. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
Welcome back. Day number 2 here at the Indianapolis Scouting Combine. We're happy to have you. Lucas and Jackson are back in the studio. Me and Kirby are holding it down. Our coverage presented as always by Wholesale Supply. Like Lucas said in his breaking sports news update, he lied to you. Lucas, you lied to people. There is even more recent breaking sports news. Do you want to apologize before I tell the people what the actual news is?
I can't wait to hear what your most recent Titans breaking news is.
Well, it's that... No, stop it.
All right. Please inform us. This is very exciting. Breaking Titans news to start the show that is not including Harold Landry.
You two are so dramatic.
What you got, Buck?
I got the Titans report card from the NFLPA.
Oh, my goodness. The worst.
I mean, it doesn't change the fact that you're a liar, but they did much better this year.
You just going to railroad the show like that to start it off?
That was disrespectful to your audience, but nothing new. I mean, do we really want to start there? We want to start with the NFLPA report card over the Titans' big money edge rusher getting permission to seek a trade?
Why are you acting like that's not something that the two of you would do to bother me? So yeah, well, you don't like it when the shoe's on the other foot. What's more pressing? What's more important than the Titans NFLPA report card? Yeah, Harold Landry is probably out, is the news of the day. As Lucas said, Adam Schefter first on the report. They're granting him permission, and I noticed what you put in the grid this morning, Lucas, on Landry requesting a trade. That's not true. He did not request a trade. He is being granted permission to seek a trade. Those are two different things. That's basically like, hey, bud, we're thinking about making some changes here. This is a new front office structure. We've got a couple of people in the draft that we're keeping our eye on, and potentially free agency as well. So why don't you see what your options are? It's kind of like a reverse Stafford. Stafford's agent was given permission to explore the market to see, what's a reasonable contract that the Rams could give out to Matt Stafford. In the case of Harold Landry, it's like, we prefer not to cut you. So if you could find somebody who's more interested in you, and we potentially could start a conversation about what it might cost to get you and your $17 million cap hit in 2025, then let's do that. Because more likely than not, if they can't move him, it's not like it's definitive that they're going to cut him, but they might be also asking him for a pay cut at a certain point in time. And that is something that has to be considered as well. But it could be a pay cut. It could be an outright cut. Either way, the Titans are giving Harold Landry permission to seek a trade.
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of was the Stafford situation. I wondered how much of a pay cut tactic this could be for the Titans. His cap hit is more than 17.5. That's just his base salary. for 2025. His cap hit each of the next 2 years is over $24 million. And the Titans have an out of his contract this offseason where they would take on a dead cap hit of over $13 million just by cutting him loose. But it would lead to savings down the road in 2025 and 2026. So that's the first thing I thought of. I wondered was how much of this is, hey, go check out where you're valued across the league, and then let's come back and talk. And if you want to continue to play here, then maybe we have to restructure some of this stuff.
And it happened about 10 minutes before Abdul Carter's press availability, which, is probably more circumstantial than not, but still interesting because we did speak to him this morning. I mean, realistically, though, like if you're the Titans, what are you actually going to be able to get for Harold Landry? Because I think the value of that, especially if you're asking a team to absorb the contract on that with 2 years remaining on his deal, it's probably not going to be the kind of compensation that Titans fans think that they should get for their current best pass rusher. Because to me, if you're talking about a team taking on that contract, I mean, a 6th-round pick for Harold Landry, he's not been good. He's not been awful, but he's not been good. If you look at him in terms of, and I know pass rush is not the only thing that these guys are asked to do, and Harold has a versatile role. He drops back into coverage. He plays off ball. He plays on the ball. He's somebody who can, be an effective run stopper. He is somebody who is also, can help clean up some of the sacks to the effect of 9 total. Not that he didn't earn some of those sacks as well, but sacks may not be the perfect way to measure a pass rusher, even though it's production at the end of the day. He had 30 total pressures, though, Lucas, last season. That's ranked 104th among qualified defensive linemen and edge players.
Where did you get that number?
Pro Football Focus.
Okay, I was looking at Pro Football Reference that has him ranked 79th with 18 pressures in 2024. But maybe
either way, not
different
good.
Metrics. No, not
good for the cost,
yeah.
Especially when you consider. He's only 28, which is the crazy thing about Harold Landry. The fact that he's, the most seasoned veteran on the roster, the longest tenured Titan at this point, and he's still under 30, speaks to the youth movement on this team and the places that they consider, that they're still having to regenerate the roster. And I think a lot of people would say, well, you still need pass rushers. Why on earth would you move on from Harold Landry? What are you doing? But this is something that can still be addressed in free agency and do it in a cost-effective way. Now, it's really not a ton of cap savings if they have to outright cut him. So obviously a trade would be preferable, but a trade for that contract, if I'm the Titans, I'm not interested in eating additional money on Harold Landry just to move him. I think you're probably looking at a 6th-round pick tops.
I get what you're saying on the benefits from moving on from him, but you'd also be talking about starting essentially from scratch at edge rusher. I mean, Arden Key is under contract, but he had a career year last year, and Arden Key kind of is who he is as a contributor, as a player.
Yeah, but Lucas, because I just mentioned that, if you start from scratch and you get better, then does it matter? I mean, who cares? If you're a better unit and you start from scratch, or you start from scratch and you
that's a big if.
Unit.
It's a very big if. It's much harder to get better at that position when you start from scratch.
Carter, he's a considerably better. He's a premier pass rusher. Harold has never been that in his career. He's a versatile player. He plays a bunch of different positions, but he is not the pass rusher that Abdul Carter is.
No, he's not. But your pass rush is substantially better when Harold Landry is opposite Abdul Carter rather than Abdul Carter getting all of the attention there. I mean, I get what you're saying, but Harold's best years in Tennessee came when who was opposite him?
I guess Bud
Dupree.
When he was on the field.
Yeah, when he was on the field.
Was so few and far between. I mean, like Harold's best year was the 12-sack year. I mean, if you're gonna look at just purely the statistics, and then he got the contract, and then he missed the entire season with the ACL. But like you're limiting it to players who are just on the roster right now. We have to go through free agency. Fair to expect that they're going to address their defensive front in free agency beyond just like Abdul Carter's not going to be the only addition here, right?
Of course.
I feel pretty confident in saying that, and I know that still keeps it a bit nebulous, but that's a clear and obvious upgrade to me. I don't think that Harold Landry is some kind of piece that would substantially affect one of the worst moving on from Harold Landry. And adding additional players would substantially affect one of the worst pass rush units in football last year.
Yeah, and he hasn't played up to the contract. We can definitely agree on that. On aggregate, the 2021 season was great. He's had double-digit sack seasons, but overall, he's not lived up to that contract that he signed a couple years ago. But when you're looking at available pass rushers in free agency, you're looking at the likes of Matt Judon, Khalil Mack, who at this point is 34 years old. You're looking at, just in terms of outside linebackers, Hassan Reddick and the saga that precedes him in the move from the Eagles to the Jets. You know, there's
why does it have to be a long-term situation, though? Like, I'm looking at Washington, and we'll talk to Emory Hunt here in about 10 minutes about why he feels bullish on Tennessee specifically, especially if they add one of these quarterbacks. Like, look at Washington in the way that they approach free agency. It's a one-year deal for Zach Ertz. It's a one-year deal for Bobby Wagner. It's a bunch of one-year stopgap type of players. Why can't that be the path? I mean, Khalil Mack makes a ton of sense with Abdul Carter.
So, but then in that case, you're talking about it as though Abdul Carter is here. And
Sure.
If the Titans love Cam Ward and think he can be their franchise quarterback, but want to part ways with Harold Landry, then you're in a really bad spot at edge rusher. And it's hard to picture the Titans getting better from where they were a year ago, where they hardly affected the quarterback. I mean, you are not literally starting from scratch. There are players in the building. Arden Key's under contract. Maybe you can get something out of Jalen Harrell. Maybe you can still get something out of the UDFA, whose name is escaping me, from Ferris State, that we talked about a ton, that hadn't really made an impact in the last couple of years.
Are you talking about Caleb Murphy?
Caleb Murphy.
He hadn't been on the roster for like 6 months, bud.
Okay, so they cut Caleb Murphy. That's right. See, I forgot about that.
He was on the Chargers.
Listen.
Listen.
That's what I'm talking about.
I get what you're saying.
You'd be starting from scratch there.
The unknown is troublesome, but there are a bunch of different football players out there, and you can find a bunch of different football players who can do better than the 104th ranked pass rusher in the NFL last season with a couple of combinations. Just because it's not Abdul Carter doesn't mean that there's not good players. Michael Williams is somebody who I know the Titans like. That's something that's started to pick up steam here in the last couple of days in Indianapolis. And, you know, there's plenty of players who they'll like and plenty of players who they'll keep their comments more close to the vest on. But there are options here and available. I understand that people get stuck at the top of the draft, really get stuck in the first round as far as the value that you're assigning. But there are plenty of players on day 2, and I would even venture day 3 into the defensive line to say you can address this and make it a better unit even if you don't have Harold Landry a part of it. I understand it's the unknown, and that's a total hypothetical, and Harold Landry is a known commodity who has been on this roster for years and years at a time. But I just don't think it's that deep.
And they could think that Harold Landry's best is behind him, no matter how much help is around him. They could definitely have that opinion of him. But for me, especially if he is willing to look around the league, gauge what his value would be, and come back for less money, I'd rather go that route than having to start over at the position. I'm
fine with him on a pay cut.
The money is too big for what the production has been. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, I think there's something to Harold's. I don't want to assign too much value to. He's kind of a homebody, right? Like he's made his home. He's started a family in Middle Tennessee, even though he's still young. Like he's pretty far along in his NFL career at this point in time. There is some value to that. So he may look around and be like, yeah, it's not really worth it for me to go play for a bad football team that might want to trade a 6th-round pick or a fourth round pick. Obviously, you do that deal if you're the Titans, and I think in a heartbeat. But that may not be worth it to Harold at this stage of his career as well, if there is still interest in bringing him back for a lower salary, which I could absolutely see them open to. So we can get into a couple of different things with Emory Hunt of Football Game Plan, who will join us here in just a little bit, live from the Combine. 615-737-1045 is how you get involved. Our coverage presented by Wholesale Supply. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. Welcome back to the show. We are fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken up here at the NFL Scouting Combine. We're happy to have you. 615-737-1045 is how you jump in the meantime. Emory Hunt football game plan going to join us here in just a few minutes from now. Emory thinks the Titans are going to the playoffs if they draft one of these quarterbacks, Lucas, and I had to grab him by the shoulders and shake him and be like, what?
So Emory Hunt is not currently with you at the setup?
No, he's about 3 minutes from me, is what he said via text.
He was on with Ramon, Kayla, and Will earlier today. He just really likes these quarterbacks, man. I know you can get into all the Titans stuff and what he thinks of the current state of the Titans roster, but I have not heard any draft analyst, and Emory is a fantastic analyst, and he goes deeper into the weeds on prospects that we don't hear about more than almost any analyst that we see working for any of these major networks. But he just loves these quarterbacks.
And that's kind of the place that I'm most interested to dive in with him. Not just about the two at the top, but like the narrative, why he thinks the narrative around this quarterback class generally has been unfair, because I think he's hinted at that. Well, maybe not even hinted at that, kind of shouted it from the rooftops on Twitter, to your point, and specifically about any kind of denigration on Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders is, would they be a first-round pick in last year's first round when there were 6 first-round quarterbacks? Would they even sniff Bo Nix, who was the 12th overall selection before, I think we went, 4 or 5 other rounds before Spencer Rattler was taken later in the 2024 draft. M has some really good perspective on this, and I think the audience is going to enjoy that. And, do you feel like we're spending too much oxygen on the quarterbacks? Because I really, really do. I mean, I know it's the most important. I know the audience cares the most about that position, and they should. That's the most important position. But I don't know. I can't shake this feeling, even though I know they need one, and there's a couple of them here that are worth talking about, that we are spending entirely too much oxygen just on that position.
I don't know. I feel like every time I lean all the way to one side and start to think that this all trends toward a trade back, something pulls me back over to say, you just don't see it happen. You just don't see these teams with the number 1 pick, unless it's a draft like the Kenny Pickett class in 2022, not fall in love with one of these guys. You don't get that many opportunities to take the best quarterback in the draft class at number 1 overall. So every time I lean too far to one side, I feel like I get pulled back over to somewhere in the middle. So no, I don't think we're spending too much time on these guys because of the variance of opinion. Like even last year, if anything, we were spending too much time banging the drum because we all knew what was going to happen in terms of the very top of the quarterback class. Nobody predicted that Michael Penix would be a top 10 pick. Certainly nobody really predicted, for the most part, that Bo Nix would be a top 15 pick. But there's just so much variance of opinion on these guys and so much variance of possibilities on what the Titans can do specifically that it makes sense to me why we get so hung up on it, even though this draft is very deep in other areas of need for the Titans.
Yeah, so while we wait for him to stop by the table here, let's talk about another position group. Let's talk about where the draft is the deepest. The numbers are on the defensive line. And as you get, we talked to a great many defensive linemen today. We talked to a great many linebackers and edge guys throughout the course of the day. I did not go for the specialist session, Lucas, even though the Titans have a 40-year-old kicker. How old is Morgan Cox?
Oh, Morgan's got to be...
I bet he's 37.
Yeah,
if I had to take a guess.
Probably about right. He is 38.
Okay, so
he will be 37 in a couple months.
I did
or 39 in a couple months. He's not going backwards. Yeah, you just gave me 3 different ages there. Yes, Morgan Cox also has found the fountain of youth. That's more breaking news.
Okay, so either way, even though the Titans have an aging special teams unit, I did not attend the specialists podium. What I am always happy to have is the presence of Emory Hunt of CBS Sports and Football Game Plan here with us on 104.5 The Zone. It's his second tour of duty on the radio station today. because M's a very popular guy. He's the mayor of the Combine at this time of year. What's happening, big dog?
Nothing much, man. How you doing, man? Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. I am doing great. I am so curious to see what the Titans are going to do with the number 1 overall draft pick, and I love that you are way more optimistic than I have heard anybody be about this professional football team, and the audience is grateful for that too, Emery, because I've been dumping on them for 6 months.
Listen, we know football is not about one guy, but at times it can be about one guy, and we saw this with Washington. And I said this after Washington drafted Jayden Daniels, that this was a team that wasn't that far off. They could get to that 6th or 7th seed in the NFC and make the postseason, which sounds weird for a team that was picking 2nd overall. And I felt that way about Tennessee because, to me, Tennessee is one of those teams that still has a lot of talent individually. We know they were banged up on defense. We know they got some guys back healthy. And we know, offensively speaking, they got good backs, have a good receiver that could add more talent to that. They got a good tight end. There are some things in place for these guys to really, especially in this division where they've played everybody tough, and they were a few plays away from probably beating a couple of these teams in the division. It can go either way. Now, what makes the AFC tougher than the NFC, that everybody is good. You know what I'm saying? So you got to, even the Raiders are competitive. So you really have to pick your spots to be successful, and I think Tennessee can do that with either one of these guys.
And that's why I appreciate your perspective, not just because I know you put in the work and I know you study these guys, and not just the guys at the top of the draft, but you're very thorough throughout the course of your career documenting things for Football Game Plan. At FBall Game Plan is where you can follow him, of course, on the socials. Why do you think the narrative has been so unfair, specific to the top 2 guys?
I believe, I said this last year, when folks don't like the 2 guys at the top, we'll start to hear that this class is trash, 2026 or the following year. But history is the same all the time. We ignore it. They said the same thing about the upcoming class with Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. And I told people then, no, this class is good. Don't bypass this. We heard about 2023's class with Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson. All 3 of those guys ended up going to first. And people thought I was crazy when I brought up Richardson in July of that season, because people was like, still only played 9 games. What are you talking about? But after the first game against Utah, he was everybody's Heisman favorite. Yeah. And then so that got him. But you could see certain things about that. So every class, when people talk about this class is not as good or this class is not as top heavy, they're really just talking about the top, because every class has a great chance for you to upgrade your QB2, which we know, especially since COVID, you're going to need your backup quarterback at least 2 or 3 games. So you better have somebody that can at least be competent. But I like the fact that these 2 dudes are best friends. They go at each other, so nothing we say will break them. Yeah. So, and they are lockstep on the mission. Like, I want to be the best. I want to be the best. And I know he could play, but I still want to be out. I want to outdo him. And I love the fact that they compete that way, because on the field they have what it takes, because they both have to come up from FCS programs. They both have to do those things that small school guys have to do, but they did it on a Power 4 level. And Ward did it at 2 schools. So I'm glad those guys are battle-tested. So I think they could handle anything that comes their way, whatever franchise they ends up on.
From a trait standpoint, how big is the gap between the 2 of them?
Not big at all, because I brought this up earlier, because they win in certain ways. It's like when we say who you would rather, Biggie or Pac. It's like, man, I kind of like both songs. Like, they both got good music, right? And you don't have to pick. We never did that with Michael Jackson or Prince. You just enjoy the music. So you can just enjoy the quarterback play, because one guy stylistically is like Joe Burrow in both the positives and the negatives. That's Shador. One guy stylistically is like Patrick Mahomes, positives and negatives, and that's Cam Ward. Now, Ward may not have the stronger arm of Mahomes, but the same type of plays and the same type of game style that we heard about him coming out the air raid, we're hearing about Cam Ward. And they play the same way. They both have that mindset of like, yeah, I could buy time because I know I can get it there. Like, so what? Yeah, you're covering my receiver, but guess what? I'm going to thread this needle. Yeah, I probably should have thrown that football away, but I thought I could get outside and I took a 40-yard sack. That's Shador, right? But game on the line, I'm going to throw 2 back-to-back accurate Hail Marys. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that type of stuff, other stuff we can coach you out of it, but those key traits, that's what you kind of have to have.
Yeah, and this is something that I've just had to remind myself the more combine and more draft seasons that I do. Like, it's people get so caught up in reasons not to draft a guy that they almost start to, or at least conversationally, they start to overtake the reasons why these guys are at the top of the draft. If you had to pick one tape for each of them that encompass the full experience, the Titans fans, if they're still getting to know these guys in the process, which two tapes for either of them would you highlight?
I would say Cam Ward's opening game against Florida, because that's the first time he's with these group of guys. And this is the first time we see this Miami team against a Florida team. And, everybody made the whole offseason, all we were talking about, SEC. And this is the first game out the gate, right?
And he balled.
He balled out and kind of had recruits changing their minds in the stands. We saw that viral video. So I would say Cam versus Miami. And for Shedeur, I would go and look at the game they played against Kansas State. Because even though they lost that game, think about what was going on in that game. Like, it was a back-and-forth affair. And the last time Shedeur had the football, we saw him drive the team down the field, get what looked to have been the game-winning touchdown until K-State went right down the field. And so, but we saw him have to battle back from, they were down double digits, battle back in that game, then get the lead, only for the defense to lose it. But you left that game like they didn't lose because of Shedeur. They lost because the defense gave up a big play. They couldn't stop the wheel route. And so I think both of those games kind of gives you reasons why those guys you can kind of trust, because they're both battle-tested.
Emory Hunt of CBS Sports is sitting down with us here at the Scouting Combine. You can follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan.
Emory, I'm curious because clearly you are really high on both of these guys, and with the variance in skill set like you're talking about, if you were to transport yourself 5 years from now, which of these two prospects gets you the most excited for the possibilities that could be Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders in 2030 in terms of the upside that they show you?
That's a great question, because I'm going to answer it this way. Shedeur Ward, Cam Sanders. Like, both guys. Guys, listen. I've been around the world twice, spoke to everybody once. Like, you're not going to get me. You know what I'm saying? I've been lockstep with this from day one. I will say this, though. Both guys excite me for different reasons. Shedeur, because he's always had to be Deion's son. And in his mind, he's the last one, right?
Yeah.
Because the other two didn't have the athleticism, and the fact when he plays quarterback, there's a lot of pressure. Everybody's waiting for him to. So I like that he is able to compete through that. For Ward, I was a 0-star recruit. I was at Incarnate Word in San Antonio, Tom Benson Field, and I had to go to Washington State, and nobody gave me credit there, even though I'm at a Power 4 school. I declared for the draft. It was like, oh, right, he's going to be a third-round pick. You know what? I'll go back. I'm going to go to Miami. Miami's been dormant for a couple of years. They ain't really been relevant. I'm going to make them a relevant team, and relevant right away to where you was like, if Miami had any defense, they might be a postseason team. So both of those players excite me because of how they got to the process. And they're going to do some things that wow you. Like, I always joke about Shedeur Sanders and how he thinks he's more athletic than he is until, within the game, he'll take off and like, oh, wow, it's almost like what everybody in the country sat there and watched Joe Burrow rip off that 50-yard run against the Giants. Like, where that come from? You know what I'm saying? So Shedeur has some of that. And for Ward, it's the legitimate arm arrogance. Like,
arm arrogance is such a great
You see
phrase.
The dude throwing the football through somebody's life. And the dude is standing there, and it's like, he's not going to get this. And then, bink, it goes right past him into the hands for a Xavier Restrepo touchdown. So I like both guys for different traits. I think that's what excites me the most about. That's why I'm so high on these guys, because they both have those traits. I was this way about the Watson and Mahomes class. And for full disclosure, my third quarterback that year, because I don't want people to say, like, well, who was number 3? I was a big Deshaun Kaiser fan. Yeah. Didn't work out, but that's how high I was on that class, and I am on this class.
No, the league told you that guy was a second-round pick. I mean, it wasn't. You weren't so far off based on the analysis. It didn't work out in the league.
It didn't work out. And the league also tried to say Lamar Jackson was 32nd pick. We know how the league gets sometimes.
Buddy, I had Bill Polian out here talking about him as a wide receiver. That's a Hall of Fame executive.
I'm about to say, shout out to Bill Polian, built the Buffalo Bills 4 straight Super Bowls. Find someone that could say that, right? So I will give Bill Polian credit. But, yeah, the NFL doesn't always get it right, but they're pretty doggone close. Yeah.
Lucas, you have another one?
Yeah, one more. Emery, Coach Dave McGinnis of Titans Radio over here talks all the time about the belly of the draft. And we were just talking, Buck and I, about how exhaustive the conversation has been about these quarterbacks, and for a good reason. But if I were to give you 3 positions of need for the Titans in this draft that they could address in the belly of the draft, right, days 2 and 3, edge, wide receiver, and offensive tackle, which of those 3 positions do you get most excited about in terms of the options that could be there, say, in the 4th round?
Wide receiver, by nature of what this thing is. Back in the day, I say back in the day, but back in my day, and I say back in my day, but you're talking about late 90s to early 2000s, it was all about the point of attack. And then the game got wider. It became the CFL at the NCAA level. So we're seeing more receivers and more defensive backs be readily available, all the way to the 8th round undrafted, right, that I like to call it. So I would say wide receiver because of you're seeing more 3, 4, 5 wide receiver sets. So guys are getting more routes on air, more time on task. So you're going to get more of those dudes that can run routes and those dudes that can cover. So defensive back and wide receiver are going to always be the deepest until we get back to a more balanced game.
And Lord knows the Titans need wide receiver help at this point in time. That Calvin Ridley, ended up coming on late, and we talked to Brian Callahan on the show yesterday. Emery, he said it took him about half of the season to kind of figure out the best possible usage, and that's normal, I think, for a first-time play caller and a first-time head coach, especially when you're working against the level of quarterback play that they were getting. The numbers in this draft, defensive line comes up a lot, but what do you think about the offensive line generally, from tackle to interior?
I think we're seeing a lot more athleticism. Guys got leaner bodies. Guys are more apt to be out on the move because of what the game has become, a spread game. It's 5-on-5, essentially, because we're seeing those spread sets. So you got to be able to quickly get into your quick sets. You got to be able to move your footwork, your hands. I'm finding a lot of guys can have quick hands, and they're able to win the hands first battle. So the quickness and athleticism of the offensive line class and the group right now has been impressive. We're seeing more guys that can legitimately move more so than anything.
Who are you looking forward to talking to today on HQ? I saw you already sitting down with some prospects. Who have you talked to already, and who are you looking forward to
talking to? James Pierce out of Tennessee, big fan of him. He compared this game to Lawrence Taylor. I like that because it shows he's watched the game. You know what I'm saying? I'm always a big fan to see who's actually been watching football.
Cares about the history.
Cares about the history, because kids nowadays don't watch the stuff, right? They think the game started with them. And so I like that he knows older players. I can't wait to Jahad Campbell was fun to talk to. Great personality. He's a big Adam Sandler guy.
Okay.
And so I had him blind rank his Adam Sandler movies. He put Waterboy 4th. I was shocked. That's
what
number
was
one.
His
one? He's Zohan. He likes Zohan.
Underrated.
You just yell underrated from the ether.
Zohan does not get enough love in the Sandler catalog.
I was like, "Where's Big Daddy?" But at the end of the day,
come on,
these so good. I can't wait to talk to Walter Nolan. I love seeing these Happy Gilmore. I'm a big Billy Madison guy then, but you watch it now, it's probably not the best. But Big Daddy, carries long. So and Wedding Singer, he didn't even mention that. That was a great one too. But Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, big defensive tackles with thin ankles. I'm always a fan of because they could collapse the pocket like Dexter Lawrence.
There are so many different body types. Like, people get caught up in interior defensive line, like they're all the same kind of player, right? Just big 300-pounders or whatever. Not when, especially when you look at the diversity of skill sets from this particular interior defensive line class, Emery, because you bring up Walter Nolan. He's just such a talented player. And I'm so curious to see which team decides to go with him, because he's obviously got tremendous upside, but he does a lot of things differently than some of the other players who might be at the top of the defensive line class.
People underestimate the athleticism of the big guy. And that's why I had Dexter Lawrence as my number 1 nose tackle, and people was like, "You said in your notes he can collapse. He's an underrated pass rusher." Like, yeah, people don't. He was asked to 2-gapping at Clemson. But he can collapse the pocket. Look at his ankles. Look how quick he is off the ball. You apply that to him getting up the field on one shoulder, he can do that. And Nolan is the same way. Collapse the pocket while creating pressure, opens things up for everybody on the outside.
He's a monster, certainly this year before the injury. Emery Hunt, also a monster when it comes to the draft analysis. Buddy, always good to see you. Thanks for stopping by.
My guy, appreciate it. Look at it. In the deep voice. I love the deep voice, man. Warms my soul.
Good, because it pisses everybody else off. Get out of here. Go get on HQ. That's Emery Hunt hanging out with us. Coming up next, you got some observations, Lucas.
I have various observations. We're whipping around multiple sports here.
All right. I'm Buck Reisig. It's 104.5 The Zone.
Okay, there is a lot to get to here. There is some football news on and off the field, but quickly, some basketball results last night. Very important at the top of the SEC. Tennessee takes care of business, 65-59 at LSU. A little sloppy, but they got the job done. Felix Okpara, one of his best games as of all. The big man, 6 of 6 from the floor, 15 points. Zakai Ziegler with 17. Lanier stayed hot from 3, and the Vols get a road win. And the bigger news, though, for Tennessee from last night is that Florida lost at Georgia, 88-83. So that Alabama game looms large Saturday afternoon. Huge chance for Tennessee to get a win there, hand Bama a loss, and move closer to that 1 line in the NCAA tournament. We mentioned the other day, Vols are currently the number 5 overall seed. So just on the outside looking in, Florida and Alabama are in that top 4 per Joe Lunardi. So Florida catching that loss at Georgia is a big deal for Tennessee, who's got a chance to keep taking steps towards that goal. Never happened before in program history if they can beat Bama on Saturday. So we'll monitor that this week. Also, Vanderbilt, huge chance to get a massive road win tonight at Texas A&M, the number 12 team in the country. We all know about Vanderbilt's road woes, so that would be a massive resume builder if they can pull off that upset. But, by the way, Bama red hot. I think 111-73, the win over Mississippi State last night. They hit 22 three-pointers.
I mean, they're 22. Not the only team to score 100 in the SEC last night. Did you catch any of that Missouri game?
Yeah, Missouri is getting hot at the right time as well. That's a good basketball team. They're going to – the SEC, we keep saying it, but the SEC tournament is going to be a bloodbath at Bridgestone Arena, and I can't wait for it. But – 22 threes. Off the top of your head, Buck, how many points can you get out of 22 made three-pointers?
Well, one would imagine 66.
66, thank you. I was really hoping you'd get it wrong.
I had to think. I was like, oh, my God, what is he going to ask me? Don't make me do math on the air.
No, that's an easy one. 22 of 45 from 3, Alabama, and they go to Knoxville on Saturday. Okay, this is very interesting news. Oklahoma has hired Senior Bowl executive director and former NFL scout Jim Nagy as its next football general manager. That's from On3 Sports. So Jim has kind of been in that cycle of getting interviews. He interviewed with the Jets, I believe, for their general manager position. He's clearly been interested in getting into that carousel and did not get an opportunity in the NFL this offseason, so he's going to try his hand at the college level and oversee that Oklahoma roster coached by Brent Venables.
Before we would talk about that, Lucas, can you read the last comment in the F&M Bank chat so we can put a bow on the basketball?
Hugh on the F&M Bank chat saying the SEC is still not over 500. Oh, you thought I was going to read the whole name.
What's that last name, Lucas?
Nope, never again.
You sure?
My trust in the F&M Bank chat has been shattered, and it was a long time ago. So no, Mr. J. That's what I'm going to call him. Last name starts with J. I won't read the rest.
Your mistake was trusting the live stream chat in the first place. If you never give them your trust, then you can never be hurt by them.
It was a mistake.
Yeah, to your point about Jim Nagy, he wanted to interview. He had interviewed for the Jets general manager job. This time around, didn't get it. He did want to interview for the Titans general manager job. He was not on that list of 10 initial first-round interviews. He's been trying to get back into the personnel side of things for a team or a club for a long time. Now, college is obviously different, but there are a great deal of similarities. And I'd be curious what the pipeline for college general managers to NFL general managers ends up being now that we've created these positions. Because, he's going to have to do a lot of the stuff that an NFL general manager is tasked with doing on a day-to-day basis. I'd argue that job is harder because it's year-over-year free agency.
Yes, it is harder because you look at Tennessee right now, and Vols corner Ricky Gibson, according to On3 Sports, plans to enter the transfer portal. So it's just such a constant churn. At this point, I don't even know how you build out a roster. Every time that you feel like you've got something patched up, another leak breaks over here. And I don't know if this is a power play from Ricky Gibson trying to get more NIL money, but it could put Tennessee in a really tough spot at corner because Jermod McCoy, who figures to be somebody we're going to be talking about a year from now at the Combine in 2026, tore his ACL a few weeks ago and is expected to miss the beginning of the season. Ricky Gibson then is CB1 without Jermon McCoy on the field. He had a really nice year for Tennessee that was overshadowed by McCoy in 2024, and he plans to enter the portal in the spring window, according to On3 Sports. So, you look at that, and most people just assume NIL situation, and we'll see if Tennessee can pony up and figure it out. But programs are at a really important pivot point right now, athletic departments as a whole, because I also saw this news from Seth Emerson of The Athletic that Georgia is expected to pay football athletes about 75% of revenue sharing that will become a fixture in college athletics. So he says Georgia's athletic department is planning to pay football players at least $13.5 million in revenue sharing this upcoming year as part of the expected settlement in the House settlement case. And as we know, schools will get approximately $22 million, $21 million, whatever the exact figure is, we're not sure, to distribute amongst their athletes, student athletes, as however they want to. Georgia is a school that I look at and say they care about football and nothing else. They can pretend to care about basketball. They hired an SEC retread in Mike White, who Florida fired, to lead their basketball program, right? Like, they have not made these big investments in basketball like many SEC schools have. They are strictly focused on the football product. It's the engine that drives the train. They understand that. And then I look over at Danny White at Tennessee. I know Danny White wants to be good at everything, but being good at everything is harder than it has ever been right now when you have the likes of Ricky Gibson popping up randomly and saying, no, I think I want more money, if that is indeed the situation with Ricky Gibson. So every school is going to have to kind of fight their own respective battles in that regard on, okay, what are we going to have to sacrifice in the name of the most powerful revenue driver, which is obviously football?
Feels like it does not bode well for women's sports at the collegiate level, if you're talking about revenue, right?
I mean, what does it mean for baseball? There are very few schools in the country that make money on their baseball program. Very few.
No, I outside of the top two sports, right? Football and basketball. And it's such a wide gulf between football and basketball. There's a lot of things that are going to, not that could, but that will suffer from these kind of changes. So, I get it. It's a business decision. They are running a business. I understand that there are some ancillary things that they consider, like the development of young people and trying to help them achieve academically as well as athletically, but that's never been more pared down and streamlined, because at the end of the day, now the kids want to know what they're going to make and how much they're going to make and how much they're making relative to their peers and how much you could make it if you went to Georgia versus Tennessee, and do they have that percentage, the best possible percentage, skewed in favor of football, for example. It's going to bring up a lot of these things. Why is the chat talking about food?
Oh, you were on camera eating something. It was.
Why was I on camera?
Oh, it was very off-putting.
Because I was eating during a commercial break. Why did that happen? Whose fault is that?
You were also eating during the segment.
I was not eating during the segment.
Yes, you were. You ate a cookie.
At the start of the segment, because I didn't have my headset on.
He threw you up during the break eating some sort of yogurt looking.
Yogurt?
I don't know. What were you eating?
Oh, I don't know. I had some potato salad. I had a prosciutto, salami, ham, and provolone wrap.
Can we do a combine food review?
Well, it's just going to be St. Elmo's, and St. Elmo's is God tier. I can do that, but it's just me eating at the same steakhouse for 5 days in a row.
Quickly, speaking of Oklahoma, Josh Heupel reportedly has brought in Seth Littrell, the offensive coordinator that was fired in October last year by Brent Venables at Oklahoma, to be part of Tennessee's offensive coaching staff. So Heupel continuing to build out that network of coaches that he has turned to fill open positions a lot. But this Jim Nagy news is significant, and you make an interesting point. When will we start to see some sort of pipeline from college football GMs to the NFL? We don't see it a ton with coaches. We obviously see it, but it's not like the NFL is getting its most high-level coaches from the college game. Typically, those coaches are developed in the NFL, maybe with a pit stop in college. The Jim Harbaughs of the world are more the exception than the rule, right? But I'll be very curious at how this kind of translates in the next few years.
Do I have things to give away?
You do. For the dumbest thing in sports, you can win 2 tickets to see this weekend's games for Athletes Unlimited Pro Basketball at Nashville's Municipal Auditorium.
I've heard the games are a lot of fun. Teron Davenport was telling me how much, what a great time he had at the Athletes Unlimited events at Municipal. So if you want to attend some basketball this weekend, why not? 615-737-1045. Call us and tell us what the dumbest thing in sports this week is.
It is 11:01. Good morning from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The NFL Scouting Combine continues in Indianapolis, and there is Titans news this morning from Adam Schefter as the team has granted outside linebacker Harold Landry permission to seek a trade. Landry is due a base salary of $17.5 million in 2025 as he comes off a season with 9 sacks. Meanwhile, in Indy, defensive linemen and outside linebackers met with the media this morning, and Abdul Carter out of Penn State made the case for why he should be the number 1 player picked in the draft.
It's very important for me. That's one of the goals I made before the season. Something I always talked about. It's what I work for. And I feel like I'm getting close to that. Just got to keep working, keep putting the effort in, and I'm going to accomplish my dream.
How realistic do you feel like it is to go number 1 this year?
I feel like it's very realistic. And I feel like I'm the best player in the country, and the best player should be selected number 1.
I met with the Panthers.
For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
It is indeed the dumbest thing in sports this week. Welcome back to the show. 615-737-1045 is the number. Just because we're in Indy for the Combine does not mean that we can interrupt such a staple of a segment, because there's too many dumb things in sports that need to be talked about, and this is our dedicated time to do so. Jackson, what can they win if they give us this week the dumbest thing in sports?
2 tickets to see this weekend's games of Athletes Unlimited Pro Basketball at Nashville's Municipal Auditorium.
615-737-1045 is how you can get in the running for the Athletes Unlimited. Speaking of dumb things, I'm looking at Mike Giardi, who's going to sit down here with us in just a couple of minutes from the Boston Sports Journal. We'll get the vibes around the Patriots picking at 4 and see how that compares to the Titans. But my dumbest thing in sports this week, if I may start the bidding, are you guys aware of what's happening around Steve Smith Sr.?
Caught wind of it?
No, whatever are you talking about?
So he went viral on Saturday because he got doxxed by the husband of a woman that he was allegedly having relations with. The first shot was fired on Friday afternoon under a golf post that Steve Smith had of the husband asking whether Smith was having an affair with his wife. The husband then proceeded to post screenshots of sexually explicit texts that his wife had been sending Steve Smith, and the responses from Smith are honestly funny. Just kind of like, there's some things in detail there that we will not go into on FCC Safe Air from one party, and then there's a response from Steve Smith that's like, noted. I'll keep that in mind for next time around. Finally, the husband posts, it's about a 2-minute video of him calling Steve Smith and berating him about the situation, and then the husband deletes his Twitter account and just sends this whole thing into the sun. So I think the dumbest thing in sports this week is the husband. I understand you're probably hurt. You're probably dealing with a lot of things. You probably got some mixed emotions. I saw guys like George Foster, the former Georgia offensive lineman, tweet, because, of course, Steve Smith played for the Carolina Panthers, whose hashtag is what, Lucas?
Oh, what is it?
Keep pounding.
Oh, no. Is it really? Why? What does that have to do with the Panther? That's a terrible slogan.
They have a drum. They hit a drum. They hit a drum. You pound the drum.
Goodness.
Keep pounding.
Now, the alleged affair was when he was a Baltimore Raven. So have we discovered what do the Ravens say? What do the Ravens?
I don't know if Eric DaCosta got asked that question. I think he was too busy answering questions about his kicker.
Yeah, no. That is also a developing situation. Both are very ugly situations.
The husband, my dumbest thing in sports this week. Entertaining, but dumb.
Tough stuff all around. My dumbest thing in sports this week comes all the way back around to Mavs general manager Nico Harrison, who was live and in person as he watched Luka Doncic tear apart his Dallas Mavericks last night.
He went to the game?
He was there, and there are plenty of good pictures of eye contact being made between the two. Nico Harrison managed to get in the background of several images taken of Luka Doncic on the floor in pregame warmups during the game. Just the look on Nico Harrison's face on some of these pictures with Luka balling out. Triple-double against his former team.
Is he stupid? Why is he in that game?
I know. 19 points, 15 rebounds, 12 assists. He was phenomenal, and Nico Harrison was there to take it all in. The only saving grace for Nico Harrison is that this game was in Los Angeles and not in Dallas.
Why is he going? Why is he traveling to that game?
Yeah.
I'm so confused. He should be fired. Just don't let him come home. He should be fired. What a nonsensical thing to do. You're just bringing additional shame to the organization. Why make the story about yourself?
Yeah, and not in a favorable way at all. In this case, all publicity is not good publicity.
A loss and a Luka triple-double, and the pictures are spectacular.
Yeah, just the fattest of L's across the board. Well done by Nico Harrison, the most pre-fired executive in all of sports right now. Jackson?
I'm going with this ref who has now been given a 6-month ban because he asked Lionel Messi for an autograph after the game.
What?
Yes. So they're playing the CONCACAF Champions Cup, right, Lucas?
Yes, against Sporting Kansas City.
And after the game, an official asked Lionel Messi for his autograph. Lionel. Oopsie.
He asked for...
It's called a pitch, not a field.
He asked for an autograph and his jersey.
Oh, well...
The jersey swap would have gone kind of crazy, I'm not going to lie.
Jersey swap with the referee, can you imagine?
Okay, what is the ref? I mean, I get he's an internationally renowned superstar and one of the most famous people in the history of sports, one of the most accomplished people in the history of sports, but ref got to know better. It's only a 6-month ban for that?
A 6-month ban from any CONCACAF-related competitions.
But he can still
essentially
ref,
anything in North America. Any professional soccer in North America.
You are banned from officiating sports for an entire continent because you couldn't stop yourself from asking for Lionel Messi's jersey.
Yeah, no, that's a tough look. Allegedly, it was for a family member, but either way.
Oh, please, no. Even worse.
Can't be doing that. Can't be doing that.
I just...
I don't know what's worse, the jersey or the autograph. I mean, the autograph is like, dude.
I don't know. The jersey swap picture would have been insane.
I don't think he was trying to swap it. I think he was just asking for the jersey.
The image of that would have gone crazy on Twitter. I would have loved it.
Because it would be what people have been alleging about Patrick Mahomes for years, is that he does a jersey swap with the refs to keep getting favorable calls.
If they do a jersey swap with a picture, it probably goes from my dumbest thing in sports to my Friday Fire.
Somebody asked in the FNMA chat, did he get the jersey? That's the thing I haven't been able to figure out if Messi
There's no way
he
made it out of that building with the jersey. There's just no way.
Yeah, no, Messi gave him the jersey.
You're kidding.
He obliged.
Well, of course he did. He was like, yeah, sure, I'll take a couple extra calls a year, whatever.
Yeah, he gave him the jersey after leaving the field and heading to the locker room. Yes. In frigid temperatures, too, by the way. It was literally 3 degrees Fahrenheit in this game. And this referee is asking this man to take off his shirt in the freezing cold after the game.
If you wouldn't mind, Mr. Messi, sir, I know you've just, competed at the height of athletic achievement. And it's, frigid outside. It's below freezing. Can I please have the literal shirt off your back?
Yes.
Hey, remember when you were just a little bit offsides on that goal? That was me. Maybe we could...
So he has apologized for this incident, said referee, but I get why it's a cool moment for you to officiate a game with Lionel Messi, but come on. Come on.
I mean, that's has anything like that ever happened in American professional sports? I know it's CONCACAF, so we're talking about North America, but I can't think of a situation where anything like that's been accused of NFL refs unfairly, I think, quite often. But I can't think of a single time where I've heard of something actually documented like that.
Yeah, surely at some point in time, some NBA ref was really giddy about officiating a game with Michael Jordan or something and asked him for a picture. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I don't know. Surely, I imagine that'd be in Kirby's bank somewhere up there.
Kirby's probably accused some ref of doing that at some point in time, but I don't know if he's got any specific examples to cite for us here today. 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to join the conversation. We're live here up at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. The Titans brass have spoken yesterday. The players started speaking today. As I mentioned, defensive line, linebackers, specialists took the podium, and Abdul Carter had some significant thoughts, as did Michael Williams. have some significant thoughts about Abdul Carter and the differentiation between their two skill sets. We can get into those throughout the course of the show. Mike Giardi of the Boston Sports Journal is going to be here momentarily, and we will talk about teams drafting around the Titans and what the conversations Mike's heard, because, of course, he was at NFL Network for an extended period of time. He still has league-wide sources, and he's been keeping very close tabs on a lot of the perceived or imagined movement at the top of the draft specific to the Titans and the number 1 overall pick. So we'll get that download from Mike here in just a second. What are you most interested in talking about from the prospect availability today between the two of you? Because, I mean, Abdul Carter, I know that he wasn't super expansive in his answers, but, I mean, I don't know, man. The more that I watch that guy, he certainly looked every bit of 250 here at the Combine. I'm sure he's been bulking up and hasn't been able to train necessarily, so he might be a little heftier right now than his playing weight. But I just really do not have a lot of questions about how big a game changer that guy could be for a franchise.
Yeah, it's him and a big gap, and then the rest of the pass rushers in this draft. And maybe James Pierce Jr. is kind of at or near the top of it, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, too, on interacting with James Pierce Jr., which isn't something that a lot of media has been able to do in his time at Tennessee.
You want to talk about that now, or you want to get to that later in the show?
Why don't we do that later?
Okay, we can do that later. Mike Giardi, the Boston Sports Journal, coming up next. Yes, it is Truck Month at Two Rivers Ford, one of the best months of the year. I want to give a shout-out to the number 1 selling truck in America, the Ford F-Series. The Ford F-Series trucks are literally the best trucks on the road. They've got the durability, the towing capacity, and the technology that rolls right over the competition. And when it comes to Ford trucks, no one has more trucks than Two Rivers Ford. Right now, Two Rivers has over 200 F-150s in stock, all the trims, all the colors, all the options. In fact, I was just at the dealership on Monday afternoon because I got my Two Rivers Ford courtesy car to drive on up to Indianapolis, and I saw all the inventory on the lot. You can get exactly what you want at Two Rivers Ford, and Two Rivers Ford always sells their F-150s below MSRP. Everything is up front and honest, unlike Mike Giardi of the Boston Sports Journal, who will join us here in just a second. Two Rivers isn't one of those dealers that advertises one price and then you get something completely different. They pride themselves on doing business with integrity. Again, unlike Mike Giardi. So take advantage of special Truck Month savings and test drive the baddest truck on the road at Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. Welcome back here live from the NFL Scouting Combine. Our coverage made possible by Wholesale Supply. I don't think Mike Giardi supplies much.
That is just.
But
I
he's
supply
here.
entertainment.
You're here. I
Information.
Do you? Okay, I look forward to your wealth of information
Yes.
and knowledge that you're getting ready
the first thing I can tell you, and I'm not sure if your viewers and listeners know this, but you suck. So that's the first. And I mean, I think that is. That's the.
Yeah, it's some breaking news, yes. No, this is news that we knew. We knew this news.
Well, but I mean, now it's like it's around the league now. Everybody knows.
Well, yeah, no, it's 9 months later. I'm still getting asked about the Jeff thing. Are you kidding me? So how badly do you suck?
Quite a bit, it appears.
So both teams that we cover suck.
Yes.
And that is
Painful.
The topic of conversation this week. How's Prince Charming, the war hero, returned home? I've never seen anybody in an NFL offseason be as celebrated as Mike Vrabel.
Well, you have to understand, and I think when we talked about during the course of the year, how bad the Mayo thing was and how just so dysfunctional and like literally walk it back Wednesday. And that turned into walk it back Monday because he would say something every single week that he had to take back or clarify. It was.
And in the Boston media, I cannot imagine.
Well, I mean, the whole process we talked about, like giving him the deal before, like just the coach in waiting and then not having the head coach that was currently there, Belichick, sort of take him under his wing. Like, it was just a disaster. It was doomed to fail. It did fail. And so now all of a sudden you have someone comes in who knows what he wants. He knows how to handle the media publicly, like he says all the right things. And like literally we talked to him, he was at the podium, and then he did a thing with us about half hour later, just the Boston media. And it was like I came away, I was like, command, confidence, like all of a sudden you have there's this hope again, like it should go back in the right direction. The roster needs a ton of help, but like Josh McDaniels is the OC. He's a good OC, not a good head coach, good OC. Like Terrell's his chosen guy at DC. It's like, but if that doesn't work well, Mike can at least, dabble in that area. So it's just like all of a sudden you have coaches that know what they're doing, a system in place, and now it's like, okay, attack the roster.
Well, you basically just took everything from Tennessee and put it in New England.
Yes.
Is what has happened, and that I think is going to be curious, not just because the two teams play each other, and they play each other in Nashville, which is going to be an interesting storyline for a couple of teams in the basement of their respective divisions or trying to get out of the basement of their respective divisions. But the Patriots picking at 4, to your point, they don't need a quarterback. How badly are Patriots fans praying that the quarterbacks go early and that something happens at 3 and that Abdul Carter is sitting there looking at them in the face as the best pass rusher in this draft? Because I can't imagine New England's got money and they've got draft capital-ish.
Yeah, 4 picks in the top 77.
Not bad certainly for a team in a highly competitive division. It's going to take a great deal. The outlook, though, specific to number 4, what are you hearing around that? There's no interest in moving. I can't imagine why, other than to try and get up there and get Abdul Carter.
I think there would actually be an appetite to go back, but I think it's only slight. Especially if Abdul Carter's off the board, and then you're gauging Mason Graham. And I think when you look at Mason Graham, is that not a Vrabel football player? And he's talked about, like, hey, we have to build both the offensive and defensive lines. Everybody gets excited about the shiny toys. Patriots obviously need multiple receivers, Tet, Hunter, and maybe if Hunter was there, maybe the conversation changes a little bit, because there are people, and I'm sure you've talked to people here, it's like, I think he's a corner, but there are a lot of people here that think he's an elite receiver. So maybe that sways them in that direction if they thought that.
The coach of the Titans thinks he's a corner. The Browns general manager called him a receiver. Yeah. Literally the two teams picking 1 and 2.
And thinks he's a 100-catch receiver. Like, that's the sort of the potential there. So, but I think it makes sense to just build up the fronts, worry about the playmakers later. You get your B-level guys in free agency if that's what it is, get a couple guys, improve the room, but work at building your foundation from the interior, both offensively and defensively.
What's the vibe around Drake May?
Well, Patriots fans love him. And they've lived through, I know the comparisons, but they've lived through Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi and Cam Newton. Last year, Jacoby Brissett for the 5 games. And to see someone that can make the throws, he's a better athlete than I think anybody thought. Well, anybody who didn't watch him in North Carolina thought. And it seems that he did a very good job of reaching all corners of the locker room. So you feel like you have that intangible part in place as well. So, he talked to Chris Long on the Green Light Pod last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever. And he talked about the young receivers. Jalen Polk, second round. Javon Baker, fourth round, combined for 13 catches. Like just a complete disaster, right?
Yeah.
Polk as a second rounder, was benched a number of times. Baker just couldn't even get on the field. And he's like, they're my responsibility. Like, I have to get them to raise up. So I like that he's taking that ownership. I like that he's also putting it on them a little bit. Like, okay, fellas, like, whatever this was, put it away. Let's go year 2 and see what happens. You got a new coaching staff to impress. And then I think, obviously, if they suck, it's like, well, you go over here. We don't care.
Yeah. No, I'm just so fascinated because the AFC is just such a gauntlet,
Yep.
at the very top. And obviously we're talking about the very bottom versus the very top. But the objective
It's a great
is...
place, isn't it? You got mad at me.
Should I get you a Sad Boy Radio hat?
Well, yes, I think so. We saw each other as we were checking in to get our credentials, and I was like, oh, it's rough. And you're like, rough? I'm like 2 years of 4-13. You're like, look at me, buddy. Like, look at the life we've led for the last few years.
I mean, just like the level of entitlement that you, and I know that you were national for a good period of time when the Patriots were having a level of success, but you
very popular until I wasn't.
Come on back down here to the local level, you bum. No, but with everything that happened in the course of the Brady-Belichick era, far be it from me to call you entitled to say, a couple of 4-win seasons. Oh, what am I going to do? It's so bad.
Well,
it's so awful.
It's funny because during all that whole period of time, and Patriot fans would the true fanboys would hate it, but you sit there and you would go for 17, 18 years. You're nitpicking. What's the thing that could bring this team down? What's the reason they don't get to the AFC title game, which they were pretty much in every year? Every other year they're in the Super Bowl? Like, what's the thing? And now it's like, it's all the things. You're latching on to like the Drake May was the one good thing that happened this year. And so even when he wasn't good, and there were several games in there that you would put in the not so good bucket, the fans were already like, don't criticize him. Don't, like, he's the only thing we got. And you're like, well, this is what we do. Every week there's a game, and we break down the game, and you have to do it. But, like, that's the place that they're at now, where every week he was like the lone bright spot mostly, and the rest of it was just like, well, he stunk, and they stunk, and this group stunk, and the coaching was awful, and, like, blow the whole thing up. We would blow the whole thing up for, like, I don't know, 12, 13 weeks.
I was very much of the same mindset. One person got fired, and the quarterback situation is obviously going to change. But it's an interesting comparison between the two of them because, to talk about the basement of the AFC, and we talk about teams that go from worst to first in divisions year after year. Ironically enough, there was no team that went from worst to first last year for the first time in quite some time, I want to say. But just the comparison between where the two clubs are at, because they are going to be constantly compared. Like I said, they play each other. Vrabel is now recreating what they wouldn't give him in Tennessee in New England, so there's going to be a fascinating element to that as well. What are you hearing, though, around prospects? Meetings have started, and I know you're, whatever you are, even if you're a local schlub now like the rest of us, I know you still talk to people league-wide. What are you hearing about prospects and their interactions with teams?
Yeah, so just a couple things that stood out from the people I've talked to here. Armand Menbu, again, not an exciting name, tackle from Missouri, been a right tackle his whole career. I
cover the Titans, baby. Tackles are exciting as hell.
There's a lot of buzz about him and his capability. He's only 6'3", so that's like the one ding on him. But I talked to a guy who's been doing this for a long time, scouting players for a team, and he said the cleanest tackle prospect, his tape was, I think he used the word flawless. So he might be someone who, I think he's a first-round kid, but now all of a sudden does he go out here and test and interview awesome, and the next thing you know is he a top 10 player. We've seen this happen before. Darnell Wright, from Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
Just a couple years ago, one of those guys that was like second, maybe late first, and then all of a sudden, like, dude's kind of a freak. He's kind of this really amazing athlete. Had some good interviews. Next thing you know, he's a top 10. I think he was top 10, right? 10th overall?
Lucas, he went top 10, right?
I think so.
Darnell Wright was the number 10 overall pick for the Bears.
So he's
look at him back there. By the way, just ignoring you. He's your staunchest ally, and Lucas is just completely disregarded.
He's still sore that I outed him for the liking the OnlyFans models on Instagram by accident.
Yeah.
So he hasn't quite gotten over that yet.
He's just got these fat thumbs. He can't help himself.
Fat thumbs, Michael. I have not recovered from that allegation.
I still love you though, man. You're still my boy.
I love you too. I would be up there if Indianapolis had a Hattie B's hot chicken, but they don't, so I had to hang back.
I got you. And look, we can still, the coup that we talked about a couple of years ago, that's still in play.
Yeah, you're still losing. It's 4 years later, and I'm still winning.
No. We haven't we've talked about it. We haven't, when we aggressively enact our plan.
All bark, no bite.
It's a long con.
Yeah.
It's a long con.
Ted McMillan's another one. I think people are very curious about how he's going to interview. And I've heard from a scouting perspective, people don't think if he runs, and they don't think he's going to run, because they think he's going to run 4.7-ish, which isn't
4.7.
Right. So go with the Drake London, who's someone he's kind of compared to. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but Drake London was like, people wondered how fast he was, and Drake was like, I'm just not going to run.
Yeah.
You got my tape. You see that I get open.
I'm football fast.
Yeah, and that's it. And he had 100 catches this year, 72, 69 in his previous 2 seasons. So he's been very productive in the league. But people are curious about how he interviews, because I think there is the gist I got from talking to a bunch of people was, does he love it? Does it matter to him? And when he's not getting the ball, which tends to be a receiver thing anyway, there's a feeling he checks out. And so, that doesn't necessarily check all the boxes of someone who, for a while there, we were talking about a top 5-ish potential player. And he's probably still going to be a top 10.
He's got the ability, of course, but it's, that's what the combine, and we talked to Mike Borgonzi, who was on the radio show yesterday. He talked about the touch points of the pre-draft process and what this touch point is so much about. Obviously, medical is important, but it's about finding out who these people are and making sure that you can test the football acumen and the leadership qualities, trying to find out as much about the intangible capabilities of these players, because for teams like the Patriots and the Titans, they got a void in a million different places, especially teams like Tennessee. They're lacking in the quarterback department, which brings me to Cam Ward, because the personality, Giardi, I love that. I just love that he's
swagger for days,
kind of a bleep hole, and even him and Shador, who I know are close. It doesn't matter how close they are. He's going to dog you, and he's going to tell you just how much worse you are at all of these things than he is, and just kind of the way that he's gone about it. But the thing that I get from teams who have not yet met with him, and scouting staffs and coaching staffs who have not yet met with him, is he that guy all the way through? Is he that guy all the time? Or, we all do stuff in front of cameras and microphones on a semi-regular basis. By the way, what's the name of the podcast that you host?
All 32.
All 32. I saw you doing it. It was very unprofessional in the middle of a convention center lobby. He had a sad little mic set up and a sad little camera set up.
Why is it got to be sad?
Because it's you, and you make me sad.
As I posted on Instagram, some people called it magical. And it might have only been me and Will.
The janitorial staff emptying the bathroom trash cans behind you in view of the podcast. Yes,
there were a few fans of it.
Magic happened.
So Cam Ward is interesting because I can tell you this: Cam Ward has frustrated the hell out of some of the teams that need a quarterback in this draft, because they haven't gotten to know him yet. And there was hope he was going to be at the Senior Bowl, and he kind of told the Senior Bowl he was coming, and he got some of his boys, some of his teammates were able to come because he was coming, and then he didn't come. Yeah. And that bothered people, or at least
irked.
Right, yeah, you're just like, dude, you we need a quarterback. Are you the guy we need to, if we don't have the number 1 overall pick and we're at 3 or 7 or whatever, 6, we want to come up and get you, we need to know you. We need to know that when we make this investment of multiple first-round picks that it would take to get up to that level, who you are. And now he's condensed the window for what that is.
Even the fact that, as far as I know, I haven't checked my phone here in the last 20 minutes since you've graced us with your presence, but as far as I know, he's still undecided as to whether he's going to throw or
Correct.
not, which I think teams are kind of waiting in the lurch. I do not expect him to, but the fact that it's still just kind of okay, well, we're just going to not hold the thing hostage a little bit, but to an extent just hold things up to the point where teams are irked.
It's so funny, right? Because you want to see... I want guys to compete. I understand why they don't in this setting. You're a quarterback. You're going to throw to receivers that you've never thrown to, that maybe you just met 2 minutes ago. That's, a couple years ago when C.J. Stroud threw, he and Jackson Smith and the Jigba, if you were watching, they kept coordinating when it was his turn to throw that Jackson was the guy in line.
Yeah.
So he got to throw to his guy a lot more, and he put on, people were like, oh, my God, can he throw the football? Yeah. Of course, if you watched him at Ohio State, that's what you thought anyway. And so I think that's where, we're in the player empowerment era in a bunch of different sports. And he's like, dude, my tape is my tape, man. Like, me in shorts and a T-shirt, like, what the hell does it matter?
Right.
Like, you saw me throw interceptions and dig us this freaking hole against California. And then you saw me take us right back out and we won the game because of me. So, like, yeah, I put us there, but then it didn't bother me, and I pulled us back out and won it. And that's the kind of stuff that scouts go like, I wish you didn't make that mistake, but the man is good enough to correct the mistake, and then, boom, the guys believed, which is, a massive part of this thing, too.
Mike Giardi, Boston Sports Journal, here with us on 104.5 The Zone. At Mike Giardi is where you can harass him on Twitter. Titans at 1, Patriots at 4. You're getting ready to go speak to Elliott Wolf. What is the biggest question that you have for? He's not the general manager, is he?
Well, they have not given out the general manager title in, I think, maybe in the entirety of the Kraft ownership or something close to it.
Okay,
and
that's different.
Bill Belichick was very anti-title. So I don't know how much of Bill's influence or how much of this is the Krafts. Of course, when you give guys certain titles like general manager, there's an expectation of maybe a different pay level.
I just went through the whole title debate for an offseason. Who's doing what?
But my question for Elliott Wolf will be, who has final say? Because last year at this very place, at this very podium that he's speaking at, he told us, at least when it came to the draft, my decision. I have the final say. We collaborate, because that was the big buzzword, collaboration, which you can take your collaboration and shove it.
It's the only thing you and I agree upon. I don't even say it. I don't say the word anymore. I call it the C word.
Absolutely a punishing word. I don't believe he's going to say the same thing when I ask him or someone else asks him.
Bet your ass not.
And when we asked Mike Vrabel, when we talked to him yesterday, he said he danced around it, but I wouldn't be here if I wasn't comfortable with the setup. And to me and many others who listened and who have been reporting on this since he took the job, it's his call.
Yeah.
And there's been some pushback from the Patriots in the last 24 hours about that take because of what Mike said.
It just means you've gotten too close to the truth.
Right, exactly. So none of us have, that didn't waver any of us, despite their attempts.
I would say. All right, you can get out of here. I'm done with you. Go talk to your general manager or whatever he is.
Yeah, Executive Vice President of Player Personnel.
All right, that's complicated. That's Mike Giardi of the Boston Sports Journal. We cut his mic because I'm done talking to him. He tried to say bye to Lucas, but I wouldn't let him. No extra love for Lucas around here. Some interesting stuff, though, there on the prospects and the team interaction, though, huh, Lucas?
Yeah, interesting stuff. I'm still thinking about how you guys ended that, talking about collaboration not being the way to go. Like, I get you're sick of the word, but so the answer is to just put it all on one person with how all-encompassing these jobs are. I feel like that would be like turning that way in at the college football level and just putting all the responsibilities as those responsibilities become greater and greater on one person in the head coach, and I feel like that would end in disaster. Just because it hasn't worked here, I don't think means that collaboration is the wrong way to go about building a football team, that you shouldn't have multiple voices in the room in building a football team and it all falls on one person.
No, and I understand why that would land on you that way, but I think it's specific to the situation. Like, I think what Giardi is saying is specific to what the Patriots are right now. Like, it doesn't benefit them to do that. They have clearly invested in a plan that Tennessee wasn't interested in, which is Mike Vrabel has the most power of this, and we're doing things Mike's way, and you are there to collaborate with that specific individual. And if you are not in that mood, then we will find somebody else who is more in the mood to go along with the flow. I think in Tennessee here it's different. It is because you have different parties. You've moved away from a coach-centric atmosphere, and not that the coach doesn't have a significant role and obviously has some level of input. We asked Mike Borgonzi about Callahan's level of essentially his helpfulness, how much of an asset he is in the quarterback evaluation stuff, and you heard the Titans GM say it, who didn't hire Brian Callahan. Huge to have Brian Callahan as a part of this. So I get what you're saying about how we ended that segment, but I think it's unique to what specific franchise you're talking about and the direction that they have clearly put all their chips in on.
And I get investing in Mike Vrabel, the coach. I firmly believe Mike Vrabel is an excellent head coach. I have so many questions about investing in Mike Vrabel as the de facto general manager. That, to me, for a roster with that many needs, that's where I raise my eyebrows because he has done nothing to prove that he can fill that role. But, we'll see. I mean, the results will play out, and we'll know one way or another, I guess, this year or next year. We'll see what direction it's kind of trending.
Well, I think for our purposes, we can put a bow on it whenever they go head-to-head and just, be done with this for once and for all, one way or the other, depending on how that Patriots-Titans game goes.
We're acting like that's an end-all, be-all. And I understand this team.
I think it depends where it is in the schedule and how it is that the two teams are. Well, I think the Patriots are a different talking point. But specific to the Titans, I do think it matters, depending on where they are in the year and how things have gone to that point.
Yes, but what definitively are we going to be able to take away from that game? Both franchises are in such different places, right? The Titans may have a better starting point in terms of the roster, which certainly is a low bar. The Titans also could be starting from scratch with the rookie quarterback, and Drake May could be taking a big year two leap. There's so many variables to me that I feel like we've already circled that game as the determining factor on who was right between Mike Vrabel and the Titans. I feel like it's a little more complicated than that.
No, that's how people are going to treat it, though. That is going to be a big narrative, right? Indisputably. Now, how we choose to cover it is up to us, but there's no question that fans of both sides are going to treat it that way. 615-737-1045 is the number if you want to jump in. Brian Callahan spoke yesterday at the podium, obviously, and he had some interesting quotes about not wanting to fix anyone necessarily. We'll flesh that out for you. I'm Buck Rising. It's 1045 The Zone. Welcome back to the show. We're fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. We're live at the Indianapolis Scouting Combine. So Titans brass spoke yesterday. They got the number 1 overall pick. They're a popular topic of conversation. And certainly with everything that's going on right now, quarterback has been a discussion point. Now, Lucas, you brought this to my attention, so why don't you set up this particular topic before we dive into what we learned from Brian Callahan. Podium, sidebar, and then in the interview he did with us yesterday. What about this specific line perked your interest?
Well, it wasn't in the sit down with you, and it was not in the podium press conference. This was in the side scrum with media. And this is Brian Callahan talking about the difference between working with a quarterback on his flaws versus fixing a quarterback. This was the head coach.
Yeah, I'm very careful with being able to proclaim you can fix something. There's definitely things you can improve that are coachable, that are quote unquote fixable. But you also got to be very mindful of what it is you're thinking you can fix. And I think you have to guard against that as a coach, because as a coach, you're always very confident, I can fix that. And sometimes you can't, and that's okay. You can't fix every issue every player has, but are they things you can work with? Whatever it is you think you can fix, can you deal with it if you can't fix it to the way you need to? So that's a tricky proposition when you're talking about fixing players. I think that you got to guard against the overconfidence that a coach can have sometimes. You have to be able to be honest about what is a actual fixable trait or technique, or is it just how they play the game? And then the flip side of that is, for a guy like, using Mahomes as an example, you don't want to take away what's special about him, whereas some things you would look at him coming out of college and you'd be like, man, we got to fix that. But it ultimately ends up being what's one of his superpowers as a quarterback is the ability to create and do things off the structure that when you watch him on tape in college, you're like, man, how do you rein that in? And the answer is you don't want to. I think when you watch how he's played over his career. So I think every situation is different. It's individualistic for each player. But I'm always very, very careful of saying you can fix a particular thing.
So my brain immediately draws two comparisons.
Well, I mean, because my brain went to, oh, my God, he survived last year and realizes that
exactly.
in the middle of it.
It's really hard not to think of Will Levis when he talks about being able to fix a quarterback versus work with a quarterback. And it's hard not to picture Cam Ward when he talks about the things that Patrick Mahomes had going into the draft process that were kind of perceived as red flags, but that the Chiefs were able to rein in and make a strength and this unique ability that we have never seen before in the history of the quarterback position in the NFL. So I don't know if that's exactly what he meant, but there's been a couple points when Brian Callahan has spoken, including with you yesterday, talking about, the turnover issues and all the things that we need to fix at the quarterback position. It's hard not to think of Will Levis when he says things like that.
I was talking to some former players about this who had honestly asked me questions, because we had highlighted, things like Ryan Fitzpatrick pointing out that he didn't love the way that Callahan handled a lot of the Levis stuff early in the year, and that was specific to the what the F are you doing fumble situation after the Bears pick 6 game and things like that. But I had yesterday up here in Indy, I had a couple players asking me about Callahan and what's the vibe, and just giving their perspective on, you just don't hear coaches, and it's specific to Levis because they had seen, for example, portions of the interview that Easton Freeze of A to Z Sports did with Brian Callahan, where he talked very bluntly about things that Will was capable of doing and not doing, and then obviously highlighting the things that got national attention earlier in the season about how Callahan talked about this stuff, and with a degree of openness that you just typically don't hear from NFL head coaches. I mean, I'm not going to. I do feel bad for Will Levis to an extent, right? Because I don't think there's no question that he's trying his best. It's just his best is significantly not good enough, and it was a disaster last year. But there's also something to you don't typically hear coaches talk that bluntly about the most important position unless you really think you have the answer on whether or not that player is going to be viable moving forward. And I just I think that continues to entrench what we already know, which is that the Titans just cannot be in the business of Will Levis moving forward.
Right, exactly. And Callahan at every turn has also talked about player and talent overpowering scheme fit. So that was, that kind of defined our conversations about these quarterbacks. Well, Cam Ward, probably the more talented player between the two. Shedeur Sanders, probably the better fit. But it is as even-keeled as it has been for me in terms of what they could do here. And they've done a nice job of making sure all of those options are right there on the surface. We're very early in the process, acknowledging quarterback is a need, acknowledging they need draft picks, all of these things. But this is what we do at this time of year, too. Like, there's no giant overarching takeaways. Did you hear what Brian Callahan said at the Combine? But it's just us trying to read between the lines on certain things, like Brian Callahan saying that he is now wary of the idea of being able to, quote-unquote, fix a quarterback.
Yeah, and I like I said, I feel like that is maybe not totally influenced by last season, but significantly influenced by last season.
He told you yesterday just how much last season influenced his approach on what this roster needs, the makeup of this football team. And it makes sense, and that surely is one of, if not the most front-facing issue that he's been thinking about all offseason, the most important position that he was brought in here. That was the headline of the Brian Callahan hire, someone who has worked with elite quarterbacks, who has put elite quarterbacks in position to succeed. So, I imagine it takes up a big chunk of what he's been thinking about throughout the course of the offseason and the rest of the front office.
To that point, Jackson, at your convenience, can I hear from Brian Callahan on the radio show yesterday about not forcing a quarterback into a scheme and how that's kind of informed, or how he's gone about learning that scheme does not necessarily need to be prioritized over the talent that you have available on your roster?
Yeah, I think it's a general philosophy. It's one I've always sort of had. I think you have to have a system, right? There has to be a way that you believe in doing something, whether it's offensive schematics, whether it's program building. There has to be something that guides your thought process. But the talent is always going to supersede that. And whatever that talent is, our job is to fit around them to highlight those talents. To me, that's just coaching in general, right? How do you best put players in position to succeed? How do you give them as much of the things they do well as minimizing the things that maybe they're not as good at? And so I would never pass up talent for what is deemed a system fit, if that makes sense. And I think that's the way you have to go about it, because NFL systems should be malleable. You should be able to fit to what you have. And I think we did a good job of it as the year went along last year. There was definitely some things early in the season that we might not have had a great feel for, that as we got to know the players better, we started to do more of those things for them. I think Calvin Ridley is a good example of that. But yeah, and you're sort of always trying to probe and find things that guys do well as the season goes. It's not a all right, we're in training camp, we're done doing that, we know what we do well. No, every year it changes. Your team's different every year, and so you have to be able to adjust. And I think one of the things, if you look back at the years in Cincinnati, just the different ways we had to pivot over different seasons to help highlight the guys that we had. And I think that it's a pretty sound way of going about it, is find as many good players as you can and fit whatever you do to them.
Callahan yesterday on the radio show. You can check out that interview via the podcast, or you can go back and watch it on Zone TV if you subscribe to 104.5 The Zone on YouTube. Coming up next, which quarterback has the best upside? Speaking of the head coach, you'll hear more from him. We'll also talk about the number one overall pick, and if it's a quarterback, does that player need to start day one? I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone.
It is 12 o'clock. Good afternoon from the 104.5 The Zone Studios. I'm Lucas Panzica. The NFL Scouting Combine continues in Indianapolis. There is Titans news this morning from Adam Schefter as the team has granted outside linebacker Harold Landry permission to seek a trade. Landry is due a base salary of $17.5 million in 2025 as he comes off a season with 9 sacks. Workouts will begin tomorrow at Lucas Oil Stadium with defensive linemen and outside linebackers. College hoops action tonight. Vanderbilt is on the road at number 12, Texas A&M. Tip-off is at 6 p.m. on SEC Network. For all your foundation repairs and waterproofing needs, visit USSTN.com. Breaking news at once on your home for the Titans and Vols. This is 104.5 The Zone.
It's the final hour on this Wednesday here live at the NFL Scouting Combine. Our coverage presented by Wholesale Supply. Thanks for stopping by, hanging out. We appreciate everybody who stopped by the radio show. Emory Hunt, Mike Giardi, always a pleasure. You can check out those interviews if you missed them to start. This last hour we are going to spend today specific to what Brian Callahan. We were only able to cover so much ground yesterday, and obviously we had Callahan on the show, so we didn't need to go over the top with it, but we've got a lot of different things that we got to parse through, and one of them is the upside of these two quarterbacks. Now, if I ask the audience, and we can, 615-737-1045, which of these two quarterbacks, Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, do you believe, as a Titans fan, as a football watcher, as a college football fan, what have you, which of the two do you believe has the bigger upside at this point? You can also interact in the F&M Bank chat where the show is live streamed today and always on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and on Twitch. I'll answer that question myself here in just a second, but first I want you to hear from Brian Callahan on the idea of quarterbacks and upside.
I think you're always looking for the player that's going to be better longer. So you always are looking for the long term. I think there's short term components that you're looking for, but you want players that are going to be playing at their best for their longest and hopefully for 10, 12, 15 years if you hit it right. And that's all positions. You want guys that are going to grow and continue to get better.
So, I think that's a completely reasonable explanation from a guy who's been around a bunch of different quarterbacks across his history, some proven, some potential quarterbacks with upside and things like that. And when I hear that quote, we've talked a great deal today about the quarterbacks, and we'll continue to do so until such time as they either take one or are clearly and obviously out of the quarterback running. But from Callahan's perspective, yeah, upside is good because you have to have a baseline. There's some of these things that cannot be taught, that cannot be coached. They have to be, it's genetic, essentially, these traits that these guys come in with. And so upside is always of value because it means you at least have the opportunity to fine-tune that upside, that potential into skill. And once you become more of a skilled player, then you can truly elevate your team and your game to the level that you aspire to, right? That's what I hear when I listen back to that clip from yesterday, Lucas.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, that could also boil down to a question of, would you prefer a veteran, sort of stable, stopgap quarterback, or the high upside guy that could potentially be a long-term solution? And his answer was the latter. The question is, do they think either of these quarterbacks can be that guy? I mean, I tried to ask this of Emory Hunt, and he did a really nice job of splitting it down the middle. As we know, he likes both of these guys, but I asked him, when you think 5 years down the road between Ward and Sanders, who excites you more? And his answer was Shedeur Ward and Cam Sanders.
It was pretty funny.
So, I mean, funny. But, jokes aside, Cam Ward, that is the upside player, right? Isn't that the prevailing opinion about these two guys? That is the higher ceiling player.
Yes. I would say that more often than not, when you talk to people about him, or when you talk to people about the two of them, the discussion that is being had is Cam has the obvious higher upside traits.
So, Brian Callahan, obviously, if given the option, would rather have the higher upside potential long-term solution. The question is, how bought in and how convicted do the Titans need to be on Cam Ward to take that swing at number 1 overall, or Shedeur Sanders?
I mean,
like, at what level do they have to? Because there's
like almost without a shadow of a doubt, like they have to truly believe that these players are the number 1 player in the draft. If they're picking number 1, Lucas, it doesn't have to be the number 1 player on their board. Because quarterback, you give a little additional weight. Like if Abdul Carter was the number 1 player on their board, I would say definitively take the number 1 player on your draft board and call it a day. That's what it is. Quarterback, I think you can give them a little bit of wiggle room to that extent, but you absolutely, you have to have that player graded no lower than, I would argue 3 or 4, right?
I would think we haven't really seen many big boards from, and again, it's media members for the most part, experts, analysts, but we haven't seen many of those rankings that have Ward or Sanders higher than that 9 or 10 range.
Yeah, and that's external. So again, we have no idea what these teams are going to do. And again, the interview process will impact how these guys are slated on their board, because the boards are ostensibly set, right? They have a general range. All these teams have a general range of what this is going to look like, with some wiggle room for the interview process. But the film is there. They have already watched the film. The film has been evaluated. The draft boards, vertical and horizontal, have largely been set, and then now is about tinkering them based on, okay, well, we talked to this player and I love the tape, but I don't necessarily love the person. Let's make an adjustment. Or this person is so above and beyond what I expected and brings so much to the table, and I can have instantaneous chemistry with them, and I think that this can be a difference maker for our organization. So maybe we bump his grade up just slightly based on, the tape being what it is, but also the person that you're getting ready to add to the culture of your organization. That matters. That matters absolutely here. So, again, external stuff is going to be skewed. We are going to have things, I won't say substantially, that are different, but there will be some substantial difference between the big boards that everybody looks at as you're playing armchair GM and what the actual general managers and front offices have on their board. So people will be surprised in the draft by something, inevitably, right? Just as we were surprised by Penix and Nix last year, and the teams will look around and be like, well, we weren't, because we knew that was our guy, and that made the most sense for us, and I don't care what you think of Bo Nix. I'm taking him at 12 because I need a quarterback, and I know this one works.
V-Man, and also Bo Nix had quality offensive line play, obviously veteran play caller in Sean Payton, who knows how to handle the quarterback position, and they hit across the board in that draft class, right? Like, a lot of these quarterbacks that find success in their rookie year also have support from their fellow draft classmates, from other rookies. So a lot of other things have to happen, too, to set up that quarterback for success. V-Man on the F&M Bank chat says, if other teams are legitimately calling about the QB, then that tells you that one is definitely worth the pick.
Well, they're not calling about the QB. They're calling about the pick.
Right.
They wouldn't be calling about the quarterback because they're not going to give away their hand. I mean, you may know, you may infer, but it's not like they're calling about the quarterback. They're calling about the pick. That's the differentiation there to me. But stands to reason. You got two players, right, that you could be calling about if you want to go up to get a quarterback. I mean, again, these teams. No. But I get what I'm saying is he's saying that they are calling the Titans like his
right about the
way
quarterback.
I read
hey,
that
we want
comment.
Cam Ward. Yeah.
Yeah, like hey, we're coming up to get Cam. What's it going to take to get number one? No, that's not how that works. We're coming up for number one. What's it going to take to get there?
There is there's been a couple interesting reports in regards to one of the teams that you would think would be banging on the Titans' door for the number one pick. Jordan, help me out with the last name. Jordan, the Giants ESPN reporter. Renan says it's pretty clear after a couple days in Indianapolis that the Giants' top priority at quarterback is Matthew Stafford. We'll see what happens with him in the Rams and move on from there. And also you had Diana Rossini saying Matthew Stafford's exploration of his market value the last few weeks has indeed attracted significant interest from teams, notably the Raiders and the Giants. Teams are anticipating the Rams will now be driving up the asking price if they decide to move him. Obviously, Raiders and Giants would be two candidates to be calling the Titans for a potential move up to number one.
and add to the mix. I don't know if I think. Let me double check that we sent it into the group. But did you see the clip from the Adam Schefter podcast that was making the rounds?
Yeah, saying the Browns. He staunchly believes they will take a quarterback at number 2.
Jackson, that might be worth pulling, and let me know in my ear when you have it, because I think his explanation as to why he is feeling confident that the Browns will take a quarterback at number 2 is worth hearing, because I was over there for Andrew Berry's a couple of Andrew Berry's media availability questions, and he was adamant from start to finish that they are not moving Myles Garrett, and he said it in many different ways.
Kevin Stefanski, too, by the way, who just a few minutes ago said, quote, "I think the world of Myles. I expect Myles on our team this year, the year after that, and the year after that. He's a part of our present and a part of our future."
All right. Well, because of that steadfast approach from coach and GM, this is why, a part of why Adam Schefter is saying he thinks the Browns are going 2 or quarterback at 2.
When you talk about this draft, what is the one thing that you think you're the most certain about when it comes to this draft?
Well, we talked about the Titans waiting at number 1. I feel like they are going to be very patient if and when they wind up dealing the number 1 pick. But the thing that I feel most comfortable and confident in this upcoming draft is that the Cleveland Browns at number 2 will wind up taking a quarterback, because they have to, because logic dictates that, because common sense dictates that, because they have Deshaun Watson, who you don't even know is going to be able to play again in the upcoming season, hurt, having undergone another surgery on his torn Achilles. You have all the money invested in him. So you need financial relief and you need a quarterback. And the only way to do that is to be able to do it at number 2. And so if the Titans decide that they're not going to go quarterback and they're going to go with a generational player like Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, that leaves the Cleveland Browns with the option of whichever quarterback they deem to be the best quarterback in this upcoming draft. So to me, when we go over all these questions about the upcoming draft, the one thing that I feel completely comfortable and confident in predicting is that the Cleveland Browns will go quarterback at number 2.
All right, that's courtesy of the Adam Schefter podcast on ESPN. The thing that he's most confident in this upcoming, especially the first round, this upcoming NFL draft, is that the quarterback, or the Browns, will take a quarterback at number 2. Which quarterback they take, of course, is dependent on who goes number 1. And right now the Titans are sitting at number 1, and nobody knows what the hell they're going to do. But I think, to his point, I'd agree with his assessment, and, not just based on that, but based on talking to Mike Borgonzi and Brian Callahan yesterday in a couple of different settings. I don't think they're in any rush. I certainly didn't get that sense. I think they're very committed to their stated goal of seeing the touch points or the touchstones of the pre-draft process play all the way out. And then in the weeks or potentially even days leading up to the NFL draft, then they'll make their decision as to which offer makes sense, if any offer makes sense. That's how I read that.
Well, I think there's a lot of Titans fans that listen to that, and I understand how different the Brown situation is with the financial burden that is the Deshaun Watson contract. But
just an anvil around the neck.
But I think there's Titans fans that hear that and hear Schefter say, I'm positive the Browns will take a quarterback at 2 because they have to. And Titans fans hear that and say, so do we.
Yeah, but they don't. Like, they don't have to. I mean, right? That's kind of been my point all week long with this, is that, like, there's nothing to me that dictates that they have to, unless, like I said, the one scenario that dictates they have to draft a quarterback is if they have that player at the top of their draft board. If there is no other player that they have with a grade above the quarterbacks that they have graded out here, then you take that quarterback. That's the only thing that dictates that a must draft a quarterback in the first round. I think they've got more wiggle room than the fans want to give them, because I think as an organization is how I should say it, they have more wiggle room than the fans want to give them, because the fans want to know who's going to be playing quarterback for this team in 2025 definitively, and they would like for that player to be, to your point, the 8 to 10 year solution of the position, because that's I mean, truly they have not had that since McNair.
Yep, that's correct.
615-737-1045 is the number. If you want to jump in, we'd be happy to have you. Get on in there. If you want to talk about these quarterbacks and how you feel about them at this particular point in time, and let's play this scenario out a little further. So, okay, the Titans draft a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick, right? They've got the number 1 overall pick. They've got their pick of the quarterbacks. The Browns almost assuredly taking a quarterback at number 2. To you, as a Titans fan, does that number 1 overall pick need to start day one? We'll talk about it, and we'll talk about the history of players who have been selected number 1 overall at the quarterback position next. There are so many misconceptions out there about ED treatment, and the Tennessee Men's Clinic is here to debunk those for you. Lots of guys start taking pills if their performance starts to suffer, and sometimes the pills stop working. You may seek out other options, and something that often happens is you'll go to a doctor and maybe the only protocol they have available for you is something like irreversible surgery. Do not go to extremes to treat ED before you've talked to the experts at the Tennessee Men's Clinic. They specialize in men's sexual health issues. It's all they do. It makes them the experts in the field, and they have access to multiple protocols and options to treat ED based on your specific needs and what's going on in your body. So don't trust your health to an online pharmacy, and don't feel like you're out of options. The Tennessee Men's Clinic protocols are patient-centered and customized to your needs. They have treatments for everything from low T, ED, treatments that increase size, stamina, everything else in between. So schedule an appointment online today at TennesseeMen'sClinic.com for their Franklin or Midtown location, or call them 615-208-9090. Welcome back to the show. We're fueled by Hattie B's Hot Chicken. I'm looking for any kind of fuel that I can get right now, and I have made a grave mistake. I went to look in the Indiana Convention Center for just some level of hydration, preferably water. The vending machine sold out of water, so I wanted a Coke because Coke is my favorite soda. It's the only soda that I really like, to be honest with you. And I made the mistake of hitting the button for the Diet Coke, and people are obsessed with Diet Coke. I don't understand why anybody likes this. It is disgusting. I just took a sip of it and immediately regretted it. And now I'm thinking about doing what Kirby suggested, which is going back out in the hallway and selling an open Diet Coke to one of these desperate media members who are obsessed with the beverage for about 75 cents, which would only recoup about $3 or 75 cents of the $3 damn that this cost me. Nonsense.
$3 for a Diet Coke is kind of insane.
Diabolical.
You know what? I think it was more. I think it was closer to $5, if I'm being honest with you.
Oh,
No way.
no.
Yeah, I'm like legit mad.
I got my future sister-in-law during Christmas. I got her a Diet Coke candle because she is obsessed with Diet Coke.
What?
And it smelled lovely, actually. It didn't really smell like Diet Coke. It just smelled like a good candle in a Diet Coke can. But I recently discovered that Diet Coke has like twice the amount of caffeine as regular Coke. Oh. So I think that is where a lot of people, because you're right, people obsessed with Diet Coke the way Kirby is with Pepsi. But I think it's because Diet Coke, I mean, it is substantially more caffeine than a regular Coke.
I had no
hold
idea.
on, son. I'm not obsessed.
He said, "Son."
I'm dedicated.
Dedicated to the
distinction.
Dedicated to the point where he did not come properly supplied today. So he was scratching the side of his neck a little bit when I told him that I was going to make my way to the media room to get a beverage. He said, "Do they have Pepsi up there? Do they have Pepsi up there?" And I said, "No, Kirby, this is a Coke establishment. This is the NFL."
I've never understood using soda as your caffeine source. Like, I've never drank a soda and felt more caffeinated as opposed to drinking a coffee. I know there's substantially more caffeine in a coffee, but I don't know, like a cup of coffee is what, like 100 milligrams of
Who knows? The
caffeine?
smell alone will kill you.
The smell alone of
I'm
coffee.
with Kirby.
Not a coffee guy.
No, you're both just warped. I think at this point in time, I'm not trusting Jackson or Kirby with anything food. Well, beverage related, perhaps food, unless Kirby wants to do like the last time Lucas was up here for the combine with us and start ordering 25-year-old scotches at St. Elmo's before a night out on the town.
Yeah, that bill racked up pretty quick.
Yeah, it sure did. He was having a big time until he got the bill, and then he wasn't having such a big time anymore.
All downhill from there.
Yes, it was. Well, no, it went uphill and then very quickly downhill again. Like, it was a bit of a roller coaster ride that evening.
So a Diet Coke contains approximately 46 milligrams of caffeine, which is like half a cup of coffee. So
it's half white. People are disgusting. Just drink coffee, you freaks.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We are here to talk about what is most important, which is the number 1 overall pick, and the Titans still in possession of it until otherwise something happens. And a question. So the Terry McCormick tweet, and you know I love Terry. Terry is a funny guy. I hope he never retires because he's like a cartoon character to me. He's just wandering around with his nose hair and everything else in his late tweets. And just tickling me with the way that he goes about his job. And also, Terry has been doing this for a long time, so I should have a level of respect for that, and I do, of course. But yesterday, he tweeted out a video, or he had a question for Brian Callahan. And the question was, do you have the level of expectation that if you pick a quarterback at number 1 overall, that he needs to start day one? And tweeted out that Brian Callahan had acknowledged in the affirmative that was indeed the case. And then you listen to the video, and it was very much not the case. Here is the audio of Brian Callahan talking about not needing to start a quarterback day one.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Anytime you're picking, especially in the first 3 rounds, you're looking for guys that can impact and play. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not other paths to that process. You know, there's a lot of different ways it's been done over the years with guys that have spent time sitting. Some guys have played right away. Those are all things that we'll evaluate as we keep going. But he's certainly picking a guy at the top of the draft that is going to be an impact player.
Okay. Does anything about that answer indicate what that tweet indicates?
No. No, he said yes.
And listen, sometimes, you know, I've been guilty of mishearing something, and, you know, you're trying to tweet as fast as you're trying to listen and take down as close to the quote as humanly possible and get all that out there. But, like, that was not the answer.
Yeah, he said, yes, you want an impact player in the first 2 rounds of the draft, and there are different paths to getting there. Not absolutely day one starter has to be, no questions asked.
Yeah. So I'm looking at this and saying, well, does it have to be? No. There are examples, and we've cited some of those examples for you, of quarterbacks who were taken with the number 1 overall draft pick that did not start right away. But they are pretty sparse. They're pretty few and far between if you go back through the history of the number 1 overall pick specific to the quarterback position, and starting as recently as last year. Caleb Williams, we have discussed. Number 1 overall draft pick, started right away. Bryce Young, number 1 overall draft pick, started right away. Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray, all going back from 23, 21, 20, and 19. The number 1 overall picks all started right away. The most recent example of a quarterback taken with the top selection that did not start right away is Baker Mayfield. And you invoked that specific scenario yesterday where Tyrod Taylor had a couple of starts, I want to say 3 or 4 at the beginning of the year. And I think it was an injury as much as it was performance that got Tyrod out of the lineup with Hugh Jackson at the time, the head coach.
Concussion,
and then Baker Mayfield,
Jackson tells me.
Concussion. So then Baker Mayfield takes over, and they never take him out of the lineup. So they're really rare to look at this because even going back before Baker, right? Goff is another one, and that was the next most recent example in 2016. But Jameis, Luck, Cam Newton, Sam Bradford, Matthew Stafford, even Jamarcus Russell, if I'm not mistaken, was out there right out of the gates. So it's very rare that a team with a need at quarterback that takes that quarterback at number 1 overall, even if you're Urban Meyer trying to present the guise of, we're going to split reps with Gardner Minshew and we're going to make him earn it and all these other things. No, you dope. You drafted that guy to play quarterback for you. Go play him. That's kind of my expectation here if they go that route, even as I acknowledge that might not be best for the player himself, whomever that player is.
It is rare, and there are extreme examples on both sides of it working right off the bat, like a Jaden Daniels, who did have to kind of settle into the season, right? Bo Nix had his early struggles, and he grew into the season, to his credit. And then the other extreme is an Anthony Richardson, where you wonder how much damage has been done to Anthony Richardson mentally and confidence-wise over the last 2 years.
Yeah, but some of that's self-inflicted also.
Absolutely.
I give the McAfee lighting their world on fire about the Colts organization and lack of leadership and some of the players on the roster who he's become disenchanted with, for lack of a better term. I put some of that on the players too, but I get your point.
Yeah, and then there is inherent pressure on whatever veteran quarterback you have starting, right? The first interception, people are calling for the draft pick to come in. But Greg Olsen did an appearance, I can't remember what podcast it was, where he was just lamenting on watching these young quarterbacks just drowning when they are so clearly not ready.
Oh, Brady's talked about it.
Yeah, so I don't think it has to be this turnkey thing. No, you have to. There's no bylaw that says you have to play him day one. His path is his path. If the Chiefs loved Pat Mahomes, but everybody else did too, and the Chiefs had to trade all the way up to the number 1 pick in that draft, they had to trade with the Browns to number 1. Do you think they still would have sat Pat Mahomes behind Alex Smith if he was the number 1 pick and not the number 10 pick? It's a big what if.
I think in that scenario, specific to those two parties, right, Alex Smith and Patrick Mahomes, Alex Smith was winning games. Alex Smith was getting to the postseason. It's not like it was, respectfully to Mason Rudolph or Jacoby Brissett or any of these other guys. Like Alex Smith was still a top half of the league, if not better than that, quarterback with Andy Reid. They were good.
There is an article on ESPN by Seth Walder projecting, I don't know if you've seen this.
I haven't.
Projecting the day 1 starter at quarterback for every NFL team in 2025.
Okay. Well, that makes sense at the Combine.
Absolutely. Who do you think he has the Titans, or starting for the Titans on day 1?
Is it Levis?
It is Jacoby Brissett. And he writes, in this scenario...
I swear to God, they don't do anything. They don't include the Titans in these things other than to bother Titans fans. Like, it's the only way to get a Titans fan to engage with stuff like this.
He says, in this scenario, Brissett again takes on the role of a bridge quarterback who could mentor a young signal caller. I think the Titans, who have a new general manager and thus have time on their side, will trade down with the Giants and select a quarterback either at the tail end of the first round or on day 2, but the well-respected Brissett starts in week 1 for Tennessee. So Seth Walder of ESPN saying not only will Jacoby Brissett be the starter, but there will be a drafted quarterback in Tennessee, and it will not be with the number 1 overall pick, but instead at the end of day 1 or day 2.
Now, people familiar or not familiar with Seth Walder, he is he's one of ESPN's analytics experts, and how that's applicable to the analysis of the games and the players. So the teams, he has them in a category, I've got it now, looking for someone new, obviously. Just for example, the Cleveland Browns, he's got Kirk Cousins as their predicted starter, which we know that Atlanta is not interested in moving Kirk Cousins at this particular point in time.
That's what they've said.
Sure.
And he acknowledges that.
They've got the Raiders with Shedeur Sanders, Saints, Justin Fields, New York Giants, Cam Ward, New York Jets, Derek Carr, Pittsburgh Steelers, Sam Darnold, which is interesting, and then the Tennessee Titans, Jake, a.k.a. Jacoby Brissett. Ooh. I mean, so like I agree in principle with what he's saying, because what I think, he's articulated what I've been saying all week. I think the Titans, I'm reading directly from his piece, I think the Titans, who have a new general manager and thus have time on their side, have the ability to do this in phases. Lucas, like that's kind of the point that I've been hammering home, and I know that's not something fans want to hear, or a lot of fans don't want to hear, because that's less instant gratification, but I do think there's some truth to that. But of all the options that are available, I don't know, man. I mean, Brissett's not awful. It's not like I think he's better than Mason Rudolph, but just by the slightest of degrees.
Yeah. I mean, how much more excited do you get about 2025 with Jacoby Brissett as your quarterback? It's not even that you can be that much better with a number 1 overall drafted player at quarterback, but the excitement level would be sky high for 2025 if that was the case.
So this is an interesting question, and maybe it's a branch off of the topic that we have here. How excited? I mean, they haven't gone through free agency. They haven't even gone through the combine. It's only the second real day of the combine, and the draft is still well ahead of us. But how excited reasonably should Titans fans be for this season? Like, what are the level of expectations? Because those things change drastically once you start to fill out some of those personnel questions that we're talking about. But even still, does the Titans drafting a quarterback, just for example, the Titans drafting a quarterback at number 1 overall, does that drastically impact my level of expectation for what this team is going to be in 2025? I don't think so.
No. Expectation, no. Excitement level, yes. Oh, my God,
excitement,
yes.
Yeah, but like, I mean, do you care? When do they have to be concerned about the excitement level? Not until game 1 or preseason game 1 of 2027, because in theory that would be the opening of the new stadium. Like, excitement level for the fans, you don't want people to stop showing up entirely. You want to continue to work on fan engagement. You can't just completely disregard it because you're playing out the stretch in a concrete hunk of junk in the middle of the East Bank right now, and just kind of biding your time with a team that's fluctuating between non-competitive and maybe we could be a little friskier next season. How much weight truly needs to be given to the excitement factor? Excitement factor will come if you put together the best possible team, and that team starts to get back to the process of winning. I'm not really concerned with how excited Titans fans need to be in 2025.
Well, that's not why you are making the pick. You're making the pick because you think it can pay off for you in wins down the road.
Sure,
you're
but I'm talking. But you just factored that into the discussion about the quarterback. Like, I don't care how excited Titans fans are or are not for 2025. I care that they get it right.
No, of course they shouldn't. It's like the fan thing, right? It's like the idea that Titans fans should draft more Tennessee players because of the Vols contingent. Maybe they'd get some of the Vols fans. No, it's ridiculous to suggest that they should make those picks to sell tickets for 2025, but a product.
There are some fans who would suggest that. There are absolutely fans who would suggest that.
But a product of making that selection, a Cam Ward at number 1 overall, would be much more excitement for the upcoming season. That's not to say it should factor into their decision. If they don't believe either of these quarterbacks can be their guy, then you don't do it. You trade out. You draft Abdul Carter. You just don't do it, understanding the risk of being the team that missed out on Cam Ward if he hits somewhere.
Brandon on YouTube says, I just want them to earn the right to occupy my Sunday afternoons. Okay, well, that may be in process still next season. Like, I don't expect, guys, I don't expect them to be a good football team in 2025. Like, I would expect them to be a better football team in 2025. But yeah, they're gonna have to earn it. Brian Callahan was on this as early as last year, and then things went to hell in a handbasket so fast. And they gave people more reason not to watch them than to watch them. And the most exciting part of their season outside of the first half of week 1 was when they earned, and God knows they earned it, the number 1 overall draft pick for how awful they were. It can't be a year-over-year proposition. For them, it doesn't have to be a year-over-year proposition. For them, for the people who are coming in here, Mike Borgonzi talked about it yesterday on the radio show. He understands how big a lift this is. They've got a ton of work to do. A ton of work to do. They have holes everywhere. It may be a while before. Like, I genuinely think that the headspace that some people need to have about this is, it could be a while. It could be a while. And I know that it's felt like a while because this has been now 3 seasons consecutively of losing, and they have gotten worse each of those 3 seasons, but they have also turned over 2 general managers in that time and 1 head coach in that time. And I almost reset the board with now another general manager. It's a part of the problem. Like, it compounds these issues when you turn things over as often as you do, because now you just kind of you almost have to reset your board to 0 with a new front office that way. You disagree or no?
No, I don't. I don't disagree. But, there have been acknowledgments of that, I feel like.
Coming up next, last call for phone calls if you got them. Also, the breaking news that I started the radio show with. The Titans have their NFLPA report card, and they have some substantial improvements that you may want to be aware of. We will talk about that coming up next. I'm Buck Rising. It's 104.5 The Zone. Will I have enough money when I retire? When should I start to draw from Social Security? If these questions keep you up at night, let me introduce you to the team that's there to keep you on the right track and guide you through it. That's Trajan Wealth, Trajan Wealth, and they are not just any financial firm. They are your partners in securing your financial future. Trajan Wealth is not just a fiduciary firm. They're a family-owned, veteran-led business that puts your needs first. Let their decades of experience specializing in retirement planning and wealth management work for you. Trajan Wealth offers free consultations to help you develop your plan and your peace of mind. So call them today at 615-270-5000. That's 615-270-5000, or visit them online at TrajanWealth.com. Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. This is a paid advertisement. Welcome back live from the Indianapolis Scouting Combine. Greg Cosell going to be on the show tomorrow. He's hanging out, talking some ball, had some good conversations with some scouts that he's going to bring to the table for a live version of the install show that we will do here in Indy. Speaking of the live show, Lucas, the tickets continue to sell. I know you're going to – where are you going again? Where are you going to be?
I will be on a beach in the Dominican Republic. I will be in Punta Cana during the live show. I am bummed to be missing it, but I'm not bummed of the reason.
Jackson, what do we do when somebody lies on the show?
Cap!
No.
Yeah, it's Cap now.
Although did you see that T. Higgins produced a Cap emoji from his Twitter account yesterday that had the internet buzzing?
Lots of aura with that one.
Well,
I think that's a misuse of that phrase.
I imagine a product of Duke Tobin, the Bengals GM, saying that he wants to keep T. Higgins, that he wants Higgins to be a part of the long-term project, that they're working towards a long-term deal with T. Higgins. It must have smelled chuggy to T.
Stop.
Cap.
I love that we are in Twitter diagnosis season. Like we have officially reached peak NFL offseason where we're trying to disseminate emoji messages from players on Twitter about whatever it is that the general manager had to say at the podium that day. It's delightful. Last call for phone calls, if you got them, 615-737-1045 is the number. If you don't get in with us, obviously you've got Blaine and Zach coming up next, 3HL. Later in the afternoon, at some point, Lucas, we do have to get Kirby's combine observations as well. He has many. I spent a good portion of my evening standing around in the parking garage with Kirby smoking cigarettes and talking about the vastness of the universe. So I'm sure he has combine takeaways to share with us as well at some point.
We do need to hear those at some point this week. Quickly, though, before we get to these NFLPA grades, did you have any takeaways from James Pierce Jr.'s media availability this morning?
Very confident. I wasn't sure what to expect because when you told me that a University of Tennessee player, you've never heard his voice before, and that's something that you document very, very closely and keep an eye on, and that he was not made available to the media on any kind of frequent basis for reasons that are undisclosed. He was asked questions about, rumors regarding his character. He responded by saying he was very anxious to show teams his character based on what the person he believes himself to be versus what might be out there in the internet ether, right? Because we've seen some of that. He also talked about he thinks his power as a pass rusher is significantly underrated. He thinks people are too prone to looking at his size and discounting how often he can implement that into his pass rush plan. And he thinks he's going to kill the combine testing. He's very excited to get out there, and that's kind of the energy that I know they're different subjects, but they're almost comparable by a degree. Like Shedeur Sanders is a player that has something to prove, but has pulled himself out of the combine testing because he's pretty confident that he's going to be a first-round pick, and why do any detriment to that? James Pierce, there's also reason to believe that he should be fairly confident he'd be a first-round pick, but it's more in question right now and has been throughout the course of the season because he didn't quite produce at the level that I think a lot of the preseason expectations set for him, whether those were fair or not, a different matter. But I enjoyed hearing him talk for the first time. I like the confidence. I like the swagger.
All right, so these NFLPA grades, what was the most interesting to you overall? The Titans' GPA, so to speak, from these grades and all these categories, treatment of families, locker room, head coach, strength coaches, team travel, and, of course, ownership. The Titans had a GPA of 3.03, which was up from 2.74 from the 2023 season.
Better than mine.
Shocking to no one. That they flipped their first-class travel situation this year.
That was the most drastic change, from an F to a B.
Yeah, they apparently put them in first class this year, which is something that I had heard a good percentage of players praising. Now, there was a lot of player turnover as well, so you have to take that in consideration, right? There's a lot of people who are not on the roster year over year and submit those grades. But yeah, the travel and then the family orientation situation. I know they hired and I can't think of the woman's name off the top of my head. I apologize, but they did hire a family experience. I can't remember her exact title either, but basically something to make the families feel more welcome at the facility.
Yeah, that went from D+ to B+. How about the head coach change? So that Vrabel didn't get a bad grade from this survey from the 2023 season. It was a B+, but it went up to A- with Callahan, and the NFLPA website breaks it down. The B+ for Vrabel stated that 94% of players felt that former head coach Mike Vrabel was efficient with their time. The players felt that Mike Vrabel was somewhat willing to listen to the locker room. He was ranked 19th overall in that category. Callahan, the bullet points from the NFLPA says 98% of Titans players feel their head coach Brian Callahan is efficient with their time. That ranks 7th out of 32. And the players feel that Callahan is highly receptive to locker room feedback on the team's needs, which ranks him 14 of 32 head coaches.
They lost more games. I mean, I guess, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because, the Chiefs got a terrible report card. I didn't see theirs specifically this year, but I saw they had a ton of Fs last year, and including ownership.
Yeah, ownership. The ownership grade went up to a C for the Chiefs this year. The Titans went from a B+ to a B in regards to the ownership grade.
Yeah, I mean, she's just not around as much. So I don't put a ton of stock in that. These things matter, right? Because you don't want to present a bad working environment anywhere in any kind of company or whatever you have, whatever you're assigning that kind of value to. But I mean, that's great that they like him better, but do they play hard for him? Does he put them in the best possible position to succeed? Those are questions that we still are looking for the answer to, I think, at this point in time regarding Brian Callahan specifically, because there's no question he's an easier guy to deal with. Right?
Yeah,
there's zero disputing that. But is he effective? You don't have to be liked to be effective.
Yeah, that is true.
Polls?
I had never seen it. I was so disappointed, man. By that time, I was my early 20s. I was just oh my God.
Presented by Two Rivers Ford, the South's most trusted Ford dealer. What's the dumbest thing in sports this week? Karen says teams still complaining about the tush push. I have seen multiple coaches coming out in support of it, including coaches from the Bills. I think Sean McDermott said something positive about it. So not everybody. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be able to get, 24 votes that they need at owners' meetings, 24 out of 32 owners to vote to ban the tush push as the Packers have proposed.
I'll be able to tell you I'm going to owners' meetings this year, so that's going to be an interesting component of all of this. But did you see Sirianni's media availability yesterday? He called it. He basically called it disingenuous, the fact that people were trying to bring an injury component into it, where there's been really no documented increased rate of injury specific to that play.
Yeah,
and also Kirby, they told me that I was able to determine yesterday that they have since changed that rule.
Well, that doesn't surprise me because the Rules Committee now changes stuff on the moment on the field. Usually it's the zebras that make up things, like a tuck rule and or a forward pass being lateral, a team into the Super Bowl back a few years ago.
I will acknowledge that they change it year over year quite frequently.
It's constant.
Now.
It's constant. But again, they've lost the league. It's no longer football.
Okay, Kirby.
They've lost the league. Ghost. I can't wait for those combine observations.
Says the grumpy old man, get off my lawn.
Ghost Titan
He just put a cigarette out on me during the commercial break. It was very unpleasant.
Ghost Titan says the dumbest thing in sports is people drawing conclusions off of vague responses at the combine. It's a great point, and I am also feeling very attacked.
You should be, because you are guilty.
Jeffrey says the Titans not wanting a quarterback, the dumbest thing in sports. Joe says people saying the Titans should waste the number 1 pick on Carter, a pass rusher, when we literally have the worst quarterback in the league.
I mean, it's not a waste. You also have one of the worst pass rushers in the league. So you didn't have the worst quarterback in the league. I think by degrees you could probably have that conversation. You also, the pass rush not as disastrous as the quarterback, because the quarterback directly led to more losses, but so did your pass rush, bud.
Yeah, well, you need both. Pretty bad. Does the number 1 pick at quarterback have to start day one? 53% say yes. 47% are saying no. I'm in the no camp. No, he doesn't have to start day one. If
Do
that's
they
not his
have
path,
to?
that's not his path.
Do they have to? No. Do they usually? Yes.
Yeah. Which quarterback has more upside, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders? 85% are going with Ward.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate.
What would be fair compensation in a trade for Harold Landry? CT says a 5th or a 6th round pick. 4th if we pay part of the salary. Brian says a 5th. Josh says probably a 3rd. Bobby says nothing better than a day 3 pick. I'd say a 5th, best case.
Yeah, and I would even say a 5th if you bought it up to a 5th. Like, I think you would almost have to buy it up either via the contract, like eating some of the contract, or making it conditional.
Those are the polls.
That's the show. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Prime time tonight. I'm going to watch Indiana basketball as well, so maybe I'll come back in a good mood. Maybe I'll come back in a bad mood. Who's to say? What I do know is that Blaine and Zach are coming up next.